Everybody will be joining us in a few minutes. A few items tonight. We'll get right to the first one because I already see it prepared and ready to go.
Yeah, we are ready to go. So I'll kick us off before I hand it over to our staff that have worked incredibly hard on this plan, which is one of the first in the state. So just want to commend them for just the creativity, and I'll kind of talk through why we decided to do both a water efficiency and a water drought plan. But wanted to make a note that while you have all 124 pages of the draft plan in the packet tonight, this is really a presentation to go high level through some of the strategies that we have through it. And following this, we'll be opening up a Lafayette Listens kind of survey to better understand kind of community priorities, because with 124 pages, as you can imagine, there's a lot of different strategies, and we want to hear sort of the ones that we should be prioritizing, both in what we'll talk about as our wet years and as our dry years. So don't feel like you need to edit the entire plan. If you do have comments about the plan, feel free to send them to send them to my way as well. But you also have an opportunity on Lafayette Listens. So with that, I will turn it over to Carrie Bishop, who's our Water Resources Manager.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Thank you all for having us here tonight. We're really excited to be here. We're here about 2 months ago and gave you a preview of the plan. And we're excited to share more about that tonight. With me tonight is Courtney Black. Courtney's with Jacobs Engineering, previously with Intera, so you'll see the name Intera in the plan document in a couple places. Courtney's got a lot of experience working on this type of planning, both from the water provider side, helping water providers develop their plans. And she's also worked with the state on the state guidance documents and on some best practice documents. And she's a Lafayette resident. So it's a big plan. Like Katie said, we're going to try to probably stay a little higher level with the presentation. We'll go over some things tonight, and then you'll have the opportunity through the Lafayette Listens website to be able to take a sort of a survey we have to give us some feedback. On that site, there'll be a questionnaire that kind of gets at some themes in this document. And we'll get you that link after tonight. And so currently, we're kind of limiting that access to just council and some of the advisory board members. And so this is our agenda for tonight. We'll go over the plan, and then we'll kind of talk about the two different aspects of the plan, what we call wet, or water efficiency times, and dry, or drought response year. And then we'll go over next steps. And so Lafayette's had some previous water conservation plans. The last plan they had approved by the state was in 2018. And there's also been some drought planning in the city. The plan was developed in 2001, and there's a small update to it in 2017. And both of these plans were ready for an update. And so for the 2026 update, we decided to integrate the two planning efforts into one plan. And Courtney had been working with the Colorado Conservation Board and discussing this idea. And we met with them, and they were supportive of this, and we were actually able to get some grant funding to put towards this effort. And like Katie mentioned, this will be the first integrated water efficiency and drought response plan approved by the state. State guidance and requirements were followed in this plan development. And so it's a very kind of comprehensive plan that includes all the sort of required components that the state is looking for. And some benefits of doing this as an integrated plan. Importantly, is it provides a roadmap for making data-informed decisions to respond to droughts. This is very important, I think, to have kind of your plan laid out and supported by data, so you kind of know what you're doing, why you're doing it, sort of what your expected results are, and sort of what your next steps are, and then how to evaluate the success of that. This plan really supports a resilient water supply for Lafayette's future. And we're really focused on protecting Lafayette's urban tree canopy, landscapes, and ecosystems by promoting resilient, plant selection, and then really strategizing on our priority of water resources. Another big benefit in this plan is it's support succinct messaging to the community, really kind of tying together those two different periods when you have sort of like those normal kind of water efficiency times and when you transition into a drought to make sure your messaging is clear. And it identifies the coordination and staff resources needed to really implement these efforts.
Okay, I've got it right here too, so I'm good. So as Carrie mentioned, this is an integrated plan, so we have two different purposes to the planning effort. This first one that you see up here about reducing long-term water use and achieving additional co-benefits, that really focuses on under a situation where you're not in a drought or a water shortage, and it's looking long-term. And when we're talking about co-benefits, that is additional benefits related to saving water. For example, landscape conversions, really starting to look at water-wise landscaping. Well, there can be a lot of ecosystem benefits associated with that as well. So that's just one example of what co-benefits are, but this is a very multidisciplinary sort of thing. And the second purpose of this plan really gets down to drought and water shortages and looking at a paramount importance, and this is really in every drought plan I've seen, is really protecting the health and safety of the community. And at the same time, really ensuring that there's a reliable water supply for health and safety, and recognizing that there can be impacts if you're needing to cut back on water use. And so to the extent possible, of supporting community well-being, local livelihoods, and environmental stewardship. So considering those impacts as well. So those are the two focuses of the plan. One other thing I should just note too, we have like an act there up on the slide, and that's really emphasizing that when it comes to state requirements, they do require a water efficiency plan if you're a certain size, and that is submitted to the state for approval, and that's done every 7 years. So operationally, the way we've decided to kind of move forward with this is to really look at during wet periods, and that's an acronym for water efficiency times, and that's most of the time where Lafayette is at. It's under normal conditions. Water shortage is not of an immediate concern that year. There's enough supplies. And the emphasis there is really achieving these long-term water savings and on resilience itself. So it's being wise with the water that we have. When you are entering a drought or water shortage situation, operations shift some, and the focus shifts some. And that acronym is DRY, stands for Drought Response Years. And the focus is really on achieving additional savings beyond just those long-term savings. Those additional savings are temporary. And they're really meant to ensure water for essential needs. But when you come out of that shortage and drought, then you can go back more to the wet way of operating. And to get a little bit more into detail of what that means, there's the green over here where you see the wet, the top bar, water efficiency times. What we're really talking about there is Lafayette's water efficiency program. And there's a broad slew of activities that encompass that program. And that goes for everything from, planning and implementation, measurement and data, education, outdoor water use, indoor water use, your rates and your charges, as well as regulations when it comes to development codes and your water conservation ordinance and those sort of things. So that's typically the operational mode is through the water efficiency program. When you do enter a drought situation, additional measures are taken, additional strategies, and Carrie's going to get into this more specifically around, we have 4 stages aligned here. But when we get into that dry response period, there's a look at supply side, and what that means is if you think of all the water before it hits the water treatment plant. So water being diverted from ditches, water stored in your reservoirs. There's a lot of strategies that can be implemented to save water. May not be optimal in normal periods, but when you're entering a drought or water shortage period, they can really be useful in helping to conserve the supplies that you do have. When you get into the demand side response, that is taking a look at how much water the city itself is using, as well as the customers, and looking at how the water use can be reduced. So it's looked at both ways, on the supply side and then on the demand side. So we're going to get a little bit deeper into what the water efficiency times entails. This is the one data slide here. We've got some bright green going on. That is water use per person or per capita water use. You can also measure it in gallons per capita per day. And you can see by the green bars, and this is over the past 25 years, so it goes back to 2000, that there's fluctuation in per capita water use. That's largely attributed to the fact that weather is different every single year. You have wet years, you have dry years, warm years, cooler years, and that's denoted or represented by that gray up there, which is, it's a percentage ET. So it's the evapotranspiration, or the amount of water that your landscape needs, essentially. You could think about it that way, relative to kind of a normal baseline. So if it's above 100%, it tends to be drier. Below 100%, it tends to be more of a wetter or a cooler season. So you can see how that gray and that green tends, there's a relationship. It's not perfect, but it tends to correspond to that to a certain degree. One thing that's really cool to see, since Lafayette does have 25 years worth of data, I usually don't work with providers that have that much data, so it's great to see, is that dark blue, navy blue bars, and then the line associated with those numbers, that's your indoor per capita water use. And you can see a downward trend. And that is a trend that we see across the Front Range, across the country, and it's really attributed to improved efficiencies in toilets and washing machines, dishwashers over time. And so that's something that's kind of naturally going on, that Lafayette doesn't necessarily have to do a lot with. It's just naturally occurring. And Colorado is also called a water sense state, which is by state statutes. If you go to Lowe's, you go to Home Depot, you're only really able to purchase appliances that are water sense, that are already water efficient. And so as people are replacing naturally their less water clothes washer with more efficient clothes washer over time, you start to see this happening. So, yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. Two questions. Like, what is GPCD? What unit?
Gallons per capita per day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And how are you getting the evapotranspiration percent? Is that a calculation, or that's not an observation?
You look at different weather stations around, like we have worked off a nearby weather station that that looks at like what the temperature is, and you can do some calculations to come up with what your ET is, and then you can look at like, well, what's the 30-year normal average, and you take like, say, if you want a percentage of like 2015, you would look at, okay, well, what is the ET that's calculated for 2015 divided by that average, and it comes up with a percentage.
And what's ET?
Evapotranspiration.
Okay. How close are those weather stations to us?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember which gauge we went off of.
They're in Boulder County, though?
Yeah, it's in Boulder
Longmont?
County. Yeah, that sounds about right. I
Might
think
have
it's like
been
Longmont. And so when we're talking about mainly the evapotranspiration is based off of temperature. Temperatures between, say, Longmont and Lafayette is not drastically different. Now, rainstorms can be different, but this is just really focusing on temperature here.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Okay. So one thing with water efficiency programs required by the state is to come up with some targets. What are you wanting to do? And so the two targets, the main targets we've identified for this plan is achieving an overall 2% water savings. And so if you think about the fact that we did some demand projections, just looking at, okay, so based on the rate of water use that's being used now and a projected increase of population, you look at what a curve would be in the future. And then if we assume a certain level of water savings that we want to achieve, you have another curve. And that difference between the curves, we're wanting to achieve 2% in 7 years. 7 years, that's when the state wants you to update your water plan. So it's kind of a weird year to think year 7, but there's a reason for that. It's when the state wants you to update your plans.
Yeah, my question was the time frame. I didn't remember seeing that anywhere, so if that could be highlighted in the plan, because the 2% is clear. The 7 years I felt like was not clear.
Okay. And the 2%, just conceptually to think about it, you can think of as around the amount of water of that is about 300 houses within the context of Lafayette system. It's just to help you kind of understand what that 2% means conceptually. So that's one piece, looking at total demands percentage reduction. The other one is looking at, from a residential standpoint, looking at roughly the average is about 87 gallons per capita per person, gallons GPCD. And we're looking at wanting to see about a 2.5 reduction in GPCD per person within the next 7 years. So those are the targets. Those targets will be revisited after 7 years and looked at again. This is not, table's not intended for you to read right here. But the point is that the plan includes about 48 different water efficiency activities. Of those activities, roughly about half are either existing activities that the city is doing now and or existing activities that city is looking to update, improve, expand upon. Additional activities, there's some new ones that have been identified that through this planning effort that are categorized as to proceed with doing. And then there's some that over the course of the next 7 years that are flagged as activities to consider pending available resources, whether it makes sense, obviously input from City Council on a number of those as moving forward. So that's if, and you all have an opportunity to look at this. If you just decide to focus on the executive summary, there's a link to the summary table of all these activities, so you can go through and look at those activities. This particular table also shows the implementation plan associated with those activities, so it lays out, hey, what to implement these activities, what will be continuously done the next 7 years, what are some milestones to be accomplished in the first phase versus the second phase of the 7-year period to accomplish. So it gets pretty detailed by activity.
This is one activity we have identified in our water efficiency program. Gray water is sort of collecting water from bathroom sinks and showers and laundry, collecting it on site at a house, treating it on site at a house, and reusing it to flush toilets or for sub-irrigation. Last fall, Council adopted Resolution 2025-73, opting out of obligations imposed by some Colorado statute that took effect in 2025, which provided that local jurisdictions will establish a gray water program. It sort of flipped. It used to be you had to opt in, and now you have to officially opt out. It was just a legislative change. Many water providers opted out at that same time. At the time, Council requested that we'd report back in 9 months about gray water. And so we've included it in this water efficiency plan. That's activity number 48 as a potential future activity. We would intend to look at kind of the first half of the implementation planning period. We've done just initial cost assessment of about $35,000 just to look at the program, to kind of research it, kind of look at the cost benefit and what it might take to implement. And again, you'll have the opportunity as you kind of review this plan to see if that falls in line with the priorities.
So we have some slides just kind of highlighting what this water efficiency program looks like. The different callouts on the left-hand side there with the purple boxes, that's just kind of identifying somewhat of the breadth in which these major focus areas cover. The main point to really focus in on here is looking at one piece of this is empowering the city and the customer with data. And so data is essential to make good informed decisions. So that covers everything from metering and tracking, metering water before the water treatment plant production to individual customers and understanding how much everyone is using. It also can be really useful for accounting and understanding any sort of leaks that are in the system and being able to identify those and address those. A tiered rate structure, so you pay your water bill. There's various tiers, I think that probably most of you are aware of, where you've got tier 1 really covers mainly indoor water use, so that's less than 4,000 gallons per single family home. And then if you're starting like the summertime and you're starting to irrigate and use your water outside, a lot of times you'll go into more of a tier 2. And so that amount increases up to $6.55, and it progresses more and more. So if you were using an extreme amount of water, you're under say tier 5, you're paying $22.99 a gallon. Significant difference between the
1,000
four.
gallons.
Thank you, per 1,000 gallons.
Oh, we should charge per gallon.
Let's differentiate that.
Rate change.
Good catch.
Might change behavior.
And then last but not least, the city's working on updating their billing system, and once that's fully intact, bringing together a customer portal. And what that will do is that you'll be able to have an app on your phone, or be able to go on the computer and look up what your water use is pretty close to real time, which is great in a lot of ways for just better understanding where am I at from using water, particularly if you want to know in the middle of the month what that looks like. It also, a lot of these systems can provide notifications. If your water use all of a sudden shoots up really fast, you can catch that leak before you get a really expensive water bill. And so that's a nice tool to have, and a number of providers throughout the Front Range are adopting it. So Lafayette, that's definitely on Lafayette's list.
And having read through this, I didn't understand what you just said from anything I read. There was nothing that sort of told me there was going to be a mechanism, or there would be an app that would alert me if I had a leak, or busted pipe, or whatever, or sprinkler system had blew. So again, to what Tim or I think it was Adam, that's good to know if you're a customer, know that's because you sort of talk about that you're doing that for the city and any city facilities, but you didn't really say you were making it possible for consumers to do that, or at least I didn't see it.
It may be in Appendix A.
No, I just think when you talk about something else related to it, like measurement and data, that would be a place to insert that this would be one of the features of measurement and data.
Okay.
I'm so excited for when that arrives. Do y'all have like a rough time frame for when that might look?
So, we are in the process right now of trying to select a replacement utility billing system. The one we have now has some major issues, like we're having to, it somehow doubles people's bills for no apparent reason, and we have to manually go through all of them. So we've done some initial research, talked to a few vendors and have some ideas. I don't think we've totally landed on whether we're ready to put out a request for proposals, or whether we might need to do a request for information to kind of find out more about what's on the market. The challenges is we're not huge. We've got 10,000 customers, and we found some fabulous software that would make sense if we were 30,000 or 40,000 taps. So we're hopefully going to find something, I think probably this summer.
Great.
Is the goal, because we really need to just replace that billing system. And then we will either find a billing system that integrates with a portal, or we will find a billing system that includes the portal. But ideally, the end result would be that you would be able to get your billing data and access the data from your meter in one place. Because we have the information now, it's just in a totally different system than the billing data, and there isn't a good way to let you log in and give you access to only see your account and not everybody else's. So
It's very exciting.
but
I love what you were saying in terms of providing an alert if there's a leak. It's very, very interesting. Thank you.
I'm just going to put a plug in for people who may be watching too, is if you give us your email address and or your phone number and have those added to your account, we also have some ability to do that. We can run reports, and if something is amiss, we can let people know more quickly.
So another focus with a lot of these activities relates to outdoor landscaping and just water efficiency in general. Just the data slide that I showed, remember the dark navy blue columns, and the indoors are going down pretty naturally. So a lot of focus on with the water efficiency program is really on the outdoor side, given that the indoor is already kind of happening. So about, if you look at like on an annual basis, roughly like half of Lafayette's outdoor use, Lafayette's total use goes to outdoor. Some of that is essential. I mean, in order to preserve the tree canopy in Lafayette, you know, you need water. You need water for healthy landscapes. We live in a fairly arid climate. That said, it's kind of two-pronged. One is if you do have your Kentucky bluegrass lawn and your turf lawn, to irrigate efficiently, ensure the sprinklers aren't going off into the sidewalk and so forth. So that's one piece, is just irrigating efficiently. And then the next one with existing landscapes is what are you irrigating? And could you say, if you want to, convert to less of a sprinkler system and more of a drip system, and install water-wise landscaping, which can be native plants, can be just drought, or plants that are drought tolerant, don't need as much water. And often a lot of those plants are really good for pollinators, so it also provides those ecosystem benefits moving forward. So Lafayette has a number of incentives, both with water efficiency, smart controllers, slow the flow program through Resource Central, Garden in the Box, turf replacement program. The fire station has a demonstration garden to really help educate residences. The city itself, and the library is an example of converting the turf into water-wise landscaping. So a lot going on with existing landscapes. And then when it comes to new development, the state is actually now requiring all municipalities to change their development codes to where all non-residential new development and multifamily developments now coming down the pipeline too, needs to install water-wise landscaping unless you have an area that's specifically used for a certain purpose, like a recreational sports field where you need Kentucky or need turf grass. So that's an exciting development in the water efficiency world, and it really means across the state over time, when you start seeing the new development, the new Home Depots, the strip malls going in, the medians, all of that are going to be more ornamental grasses on drip systems, and it will start to look a lot different over time. So.
This is a landscaping question, and you may not be the right person to answer, but when I got rid of my turf grass, or my Kentucky bluegrass, last year I watered it 3 times. But I have trees that actually were getting watered when I watered the grass before, and now since I'm not watering the grass, I'm not watering the trees. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what to do about that. And it's just to put a pin in that as we ask people to reduce their turf watering, it may affect the tree canopy and all of the stuff. I've read all the resource stuff and I've looked at all the water-wise gardening, and I haven't seen that particular problem mentioned anywhere, and it'd be good if you could tell me what to do.
So that is a big topic in the water efficiency circles in the state, is concern about the trees. General rules of thumb, this is what I've been doing in my house, particularly since it's been so dry, is you want to irrigate, like, you know, as your tree gets bigger, and you think of like the cone of all the branches and where it goes out, the roots of where the cone of the tree ends extend out. That's the area where the roots start to get the water. So I use a soaker hose, and, you know, not a sprinkler, but a soaker hose, and you want to give them a good douse of water, say like once a month or so, to really ensure that they get some good water, and that water gets soaked down well into the ground and reaches those roots. So,
but again, what is a good douse of water for what kind of trees? It starts to get, technical, I know.
And honestly, the science isn't quite there yet. You're asking the questions that there's not a lot of actual research about yet. So.
I'm just wanted to let you know that had come up.
Yep. It's a good question. It's a common question. Another one is educating and empowering the community. So this really gets into that educational piece like you were just talking about. Lafayette has a lot of different ways of interacting with the community, as I'm sure all of you know. Key messages when it comes to water efficiency is, water is a finite and valuable natural resource. Wise and efficient water use is essential to securing Lafayette's water future. everyday water efficient practices strengthen resilience during drought, and community participation is central to Lafayette's success. And I think that's a big one here as well, is it's not just city council or city staff or what the city's doing. It's really relying on individual customers to be responsible for their own individual water use. And then from a regulatory standpoint, Lafayette's had a water conservation ordinance for quite a long period of time. I believe it was back to 2013. There's general momentum in the community and amongst different cities in the area now to take what used to be just mainly drought restrictions and making it more on a permanent basis. And that's something that really Lafayette's been on top of it and done early on. The main pieces of this water conservation ordinance, I'm not going to talk about every little one of them, but one is just an irrigation window. So you see the clock there. Irrigation with sprinkler system is really prohibited between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. and that's when the sun is the hottest and most intense, when evaporation is the highest. So it just makes sense. Don't water during that period. That said, there is exemptions for, say, parks where there's a big area for irrigating and you can't possibly cover that entire area within just the red window that's showed there on the screen. So sometimes it is essential to irrigate outside the window when you're dealing with large expanses of land to make sure that the area gets watered. Outdoor irrigation under wet periods, again, that normal period versus the wet versus the dry period. Under wet periods, irrigation is limited to 3 days per week. No watering sidewalks and curbs. So really try to prevent that overspray, and that goes as well with washing any sort of like concrete surfaces. Use a broom, don't use a hose, that sort of thing. So that's the basic fundamentals of the conservation ordinance.
Questions? We're about to move into the dry part, if you will, of the presentation. But any questions on this before we move on? Councilor Jensen.
First of all, I want to say this is a lot of very good information, and it's clear you guys did a ton of work, and I'm very impressed with all of this, so thank you. I noticed in one of the bullets, or I think it was the chart, that combining the land use code and the water planning is one of the elements that is mentioned in there. And given all the conversation at the legislature about data centers, and I'm sure there are other uses that are high water intensive, have we you guys might not know the answer to this, but as we've looked at the land use planning and the new labels we're giving various categories of development, have we addressed these kinds of high intensity water use buildings that in any of that work we've done on the land use code?
I don't know that we have, but I will say that we are currently in a position where new development has to bring water, dedicate water rights and storage. So I would anticipate that that might be a deterrent to some of those uses in Lafayette.
It says water or cash in lieu, right?
So we allow cash in lieu at the staff level for very small projects. And those still require Public Works Director approval based on that being deemed in the city's benefit. And that sort of makes sense from something that's so small that it's really not practical for someone to go out and try to buy just, part of a share of a ditch and go through that process. But anything bigger than that actually has to go to council to be able to do cash in lieu. And if that were to occur, we would present information to help you determine whether that was in the city's interest. At this point, what most developments have been doing are bringing shares in the Colorado Big Thompson project, which is beneficial for a couple reasons. One, it's from a totally different watershed than our primary. It also comes with storage, and it is also structured as a supplemental supply, so we get more water from that project in years when our native supply is most at risk. So for this year, we're actually getting more water per unit from that than we would in a typical year, so.
So you feel like it's covered for those big water
I mean,
intensive
honestly, a
uses?
bigger concern is with some of the stuff that happened at the state level, shifting to high-density residential on some of these corridors. Our long-term planning hadn't really anticipated, high-density residential uses a sizable amount of water compared to a lot of other uses. So in areas where that may change dramatically, those are areas where we're going to have to look closely at that. We're actually doing some work right now separately, and it's primarily focusing on our water distribution and collection systems to understand in different growth scenarios where we would need to upsize pipes and tanks and other pieces so that we kind of know a range of options. And then that will probably cycle back around as well.
So in the approval process for a high-density residential development, let's just say the pipes were inadequate to carry the water to that development, would that be something you would reveal at that time of the application for that development?
Yeah, that's the intent. So when a project comes in, they need to provide a utility report that is, prepared by an engineer and reviewed by staff that looks at, based on national standards, what their anticipated use is. And that's going to drive both how much water rights they have to dedicate. It's also going to drive a tap fee that they pay to buy into the existing assets that the rest of the community has paid for. And it also potentially drives exactions if they need to make improvements to capacity of the existing system. That's not totally an exact science. So what sometimes will happen is the city might pay a portion of that. If it's something that we need to oversize based on future projections, we wouldn't necessarily be able to put that all on the initial person, but it goes into the kind of the broader tap fee. But that is the intent. We've made a number of changes over the past 5 or so years to make sure that as new things come in, that that basically the development is paying its own way and that it's paying its fair share.
Can I piggyback just on that discussion to ask, when are water rights dedicated? Is it at the time of zoning? Is it at the time of development, building permits?
It sort of depends on the specific process. It's generally earlier in the process and then potentially gets tweaked if something changes at the last minute. So usually it would be at annexation or subdivision, right? If we're going to annex a property, we want to make sure we have enough water to do it based on the anticipated use, but sometimes your numbers get refined as you move through a subdivision process, and then once the lots are there, if an individual lot comes in, it might again get tweaked when you actually come in and get a building permit. But for the most part, we're actually getting it fairly early in the process, in part because it takes a while. So if someone is going through that process, if they waited until they were ready to get a CO on their building permit and went out and tried to get a water right and get it changed or get it through a transfer process, it doesn't really work. So generally people have to err on the earlier side, which actually is helpful, because that means that water is part of our portfolio beforehand, so that can be augmenting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
overall
I'm
supply.
also thinking about some of those parts of town where they have been zoned, they have been subdivided, and it's relevant to the data center discussion because there are big lots that are out there in Lafayette Tech Center, or kind of Horizon Drive, that I would imagine would be the places somebody wants to bring a data center. That'd be the place they go. And so if those rights are already dedicated for those areas,
Yeah,
that's why
they're-
I'm just asking this question.
They're dedicated, but it has to get revisited,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if something comes in that's different than what's anticipated, I mean, once something gets through kind of the site plan process, if we've approved a site plan and the dedication has been determined for kind of that specific use, then that's
It gets updated.
kind of locked in through that development agreement.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have a particular risk that someone comes in and does something that's totally different than what was anticipated through annexation or subdivision or zoning, and our are stuck providing, a totally different amount of water than was anticipated.
Thank you.
Councilor Gallegos.
So I received an email this afternoon from the Water Now Alliance about several grants, both focusing on water conservation and drought resilience. Are we planning to apply for those for any specific projects?
I'm on their distribution, and I haven't looked at that yet, but we do keep an eye out for things. Kind of just depends what's available and whether it's, whether we have the resources for a match or to implement or carry that out. But very familiar with Water Now, and I've worked with them previously.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Fridland.
How did we get to our 2% goal, and how would you characterize that goal? Ambitious, middle of the road,
Attainable.
attainable?
The 7-year time period, we needed a kind of a reasonable, attainable goal for the state requirement.
And so that's sort of driven by the state requirement, sort of like, they don't want us to like set a reach goal. They want us to set a real goal.
It's not necessarily specifically specified. They just are mandating like, hey, you need to have a target.
Yeah.
I think though a lot of providers that I have worked for, they really are taking the same approach that Lafayette is of what is realistic and what can we do. And keeping in mind, this is just a 7-year goal that there is a monitoring plan in the plan, so that this is looked at, particularly when the plan is being updated again, and then reassessing, hey, have we accomplished the goal? What do we want to do next? What do we do next? So you take it, in pieces at a time.
Got it. Have we had past goals in that 2018 water conservation plan, and there was one before that maybe?
I honestly don't even remember if we had them. I do believe there had to have been some level of goal.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I need to go back and look for sure.
I'm curious if we met that goal as well. Like maybe we way overshot the goal. If we set a 2% goal in 2018 and we got to 5, then I'm wondering, is 2% right again? How did you build the 2% goal? Was it from like, we see these savings that are achievable? You said attainable. We see these things that are attainable, they're coming. And so taking all those things into account, we're at 2%. Or like, was it sort of a bottom up like that? Or was it more of like a, 2% feels good, let's see if we can build it? Like, how did we get to 2%?
A lot of it is looking at, you saw the graph there on a GBCD. So a lot of it's looking at, what has been going on naturally over time with the GBCD, taking account the variation with weather as well, what you've seen from indoor trends moving forward. And then, you can look at what you think a realistic GBCD is, and then calculate up with projected population. And, I mentioned like you can develop 2 different curves.
Yeah.
And that's where that 2% came from then.
So would the 2% be sort of more the business as usual, like based on past trends? 2% is still 2% just kind of occurs from existing trending down that we're seeing?
No, it's based on what we think is attainable with existing activities, which are primarily focused on outdoor water use at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Gianello.
On that split between indoor and outdoor per capita use, how is that determined? How do you know what is indoor and what is outdoor?
You guys are really quizzing hard here.
Winter time.
So kind of standard practice with that a lot of times is if you look at like what your monthly use is over time, and you make the general assumption that say like December, January, February is a common period where most of that use, not all of it, but most of that use is indoor use. So you could take either an average use of those 3 months or a minimum of that 3 period, and then that becomes kind of a stationary, like that's basically captures the indoor use.
Councilor Billiard.
2 quick related questions, and happy to hold these for the full presentation. But one is, I know, Director, that you're very familiar with kind of the discussion of enforcement on water violators versus live and let live, the restrictions under stage 1 are voluntary. Just wondering how y'all are thinking about that. And the related question is, I know it's very early, but we have a new comms director coming. How is your shop thinking about leveraging the new comms director to tell a story, to push some of these things out to the community? And again, I'm happy to table this question for another time.
I think we're going to get into a little bit, but so we have, largely, and again, the stage 1 is voluntary, but stage 0 actually has mandatory. So, and then just to complicate that, we've been pushing the delay till May because really people shouldn't be watering at all in April and March, and that's kind of been our biggest concern. So, we've been focusing on that, and as we get closer to May, we are starting a shift to some degree based on the apparent impact of the earlier messaging of really trying to do targeted education and outreach to people based on their actual usage. So we know from the meter data who's been watering 7 days a week since March and who's watering in the middle of the day, who was watering in the rain yesterday, and so really the intent is, rather than get overly assertive with people who are by and large following the rules and are reasonable, is to focus on starting with education and then warnings and then potentially getting to citations / fines or summonses with folks that just have not been meeting even the existing restrictions. I mean, if we were to move to a stage 2, kind of the big end user component of that is pushing people to do 2 days a week instead of 3 days a week. But really at this point, the people we're trying to make contact with are the people that are doing 5, 6, 7. So focusing on the people that are doing 3 and having them go to 2 if they're already doing a pretty good job may not be as much juice for the squeeze. But we're certainly gearing up so that if we do need to escalate, we've got draft ordinances and changes in place to do that. But really at this point, it's we've been working to get our enforcement process ironed out. 'Cause it's not something that we've historically done a lot of. To make sure that we've got clear materials, hearing process, that the courts are aware of what they'll be seeing and that we have an understanding of what kind of evidence we need. There's sort of awkward things to prove, particularly like days per week. So lots going on, but when we actually sort of escalate to that next step is kind of a continuous assessment based on what the numbers are telling us.
Great. I think we're ready.
All right.
Oh, Mayor Pro Tem.
So one more question. Is it possible, I've seen the data sources that are listed in the report, but I'm not sure the modeling that we're using, is that proprietary modeling? Or could we also include what we're using because there's a difference between model output and actual data. Is it possible to list just which models we do use when we start modeling?
So for the water efficiency program itself, it's basically an Excel spreadsheet exercise. We're just evaluating and analyzing data. Carrie, I'll let you talk a little more about the drought piece if you want to.
For the,
Yeah, we'll getting into the drought response, and that entails a little bit more of a
little bit more
different
modeling, but
I guess my question is, can we put that in the report and say, because I didn't see what we use.
like if it's actual data or model data, and if it's model data, what the source is.
Right. Which just describing that, number one, it's model output, and just generally what model it is, so people don't get the impression that everything they see is things that we've measured, because you can't know everything.
Yeah, for projecting water usage or something like that.
Right, so what model we use to do that. And a spreadsheet's fine, I mean, that's fine if we're using for efficiency the spreadsheet, but so people have an understanding of this will get better over time, but this is what we're using right now.
Good.
All right. So the dry part of the presentation. So drought in Colorado is a natural phenomenon. It reoccurs probably more frequently than anyone would like, and it seems to be reoccurring even more frequently in the last couple decades. This graphic at the bottom really illustrates that. This is just the last like 25 years of data from this drought monitor from Colorado. And that y-axis is, it's kind of hard to see, but that's percentage of the state in some level of drought, with the top being 100%. And the x-axis are years from 2000 till present. And you can see, you know, almost always there's some level of drought in Colorado. There's very rare periods where there's zero. And there's times when it's really intense and severe, illustrated by those darker red colors. That was particularly apparent in 2002, which is kind of the year everyone references as the bad drought year. 2012 was another significant drought year, and there's been some other periods there too, 2018, 2021. And then when you look at that map there of Colorado with all those horrible dark reds and oranges and burgundies, that's the current drought monitor map of Colorado. And what that's really showing is not only the necessity of having a drought response plan, but that we're actually utilizing the drought response plan currently. Right now, about 90% of the state is in severe or worse drought level. And so when we're thinking about drought response, there's a number of things that we monitor. In water resources, we're constantly monitoring all the sort of water supply indicators. We watch climate data, weather data, snowpack data, stream flow forecasts. What is our local storage? What is the regional storage? How's our infrastructure working? What are our neighbors doing? There's a lot of things that we watch. And then part of developing this drought response, we developed this water shortage index, which a real simplified version of it is supply over demand. That formula on the slide, which is a little tricky to see, is kind of the expanded version of that formula. But if you were to really look at that, each factor in that formula has like its own analysis behind it. So it's actually it's an Excel model with about 35 different spreadsheets working in it to kind of give us this index. And what this index does is it forecasts to November 1st, which is the start of a new water year, kind of what our water supply situation would be. And the things that we consider in that are, we look at this 3 times a year. We look April, July, and November are kind of our index periods. We'll look at our current storage. We'll look at the projected yield of our water rights. We look at that projected yield. Our engineer developed the ability to look at that under like 5 different stream flow scenarios, all of our water rights. So it's a really useful tool. Another thing I want to point out with this formula that I think is really key is this storage reserve. And we always want to factor in retaining enough water in storage that going forward we can always have sufficient supply to meet all the community needs. We set that as a percentage of annual demand. Ideally you would have multiple years. 300% would be great. We're not there yet. We have a lot of water projects in the works. This picture in the middle is our new cell at Goose Haven. Last week you heard about NISP, which is another water project that will give us that sort of security. Currently we set the storage reserve at 85% of demand, which we believe would be sufficient to carry us through another dry period. And the result of this index gives us this output, greater than 1, we're not anticipating shortage. And then it kind of goes from there. Currently when we're looking at this tool, we're looking at kind of in that, we sort of keep boarding around that 0.9 is sort of the output where we've been recently. And in developing this drought response, sort of in the work groups and in developing the plan, we came up with these 4 stages, very similar to other water providers. You know, some people use slightly different nomenclature for describing the stages. But stage 1 for Lafayette, stage 1 is moderate. That's currently where we are. And that's when we're looking for an overall savings of 10%. And we have an outdoor water savings target of up to 17%. And when you think of that, it's because, you know, half of our annual water use occurs in about 5 months. And so we kind of have to accelerate or sort of amplify that reduction to get that overall 10% annual savings. And this is when we're looking for, you know, a lot of some voluntary actions above sort of the conservation ordinance, which is the mandatory legal requirements. And we're really encouraging no more than 2 times per week for irrigation. Twice is nice, is what we've been saying. And then it kind of goes up from there. When you get into stage 2, we're looking for greater water savings to make sure when we get to that November 1 date that we have the sufficient supplies, greater outdoor water savings. And one of the main sort of targets in these upper stages is really the outdoor irrigation. And in the stage 2, we go to a 2 times a week mandatory, no more than 2 times per week. Stage 3, again, it's just accelerated each time we add on. And that kind of goes to no more than 1 time per week of irrigation. And then in stage 4, that's emergency, and there's no outdoor irrigation, and are really limited to essential uses. And this is, again, not a table you're meant to read, but Courtney mentioned in an earlier slide how when you're looking at drought response, you're really looking at kind of 2 aspects. You're looking at the supply side and the demand side. You know, the supply side, there's not as many strategies, but they can be impactful. So we really kind of, you know, highlighted them in the plan, and there are some of these that we're currently, you know, working on, you know, maximizing our storage, minimizing our losses. We are really looking at accelerating kind of that leak detection. We, you know, our utility billing staff reaches out to people about leaks. And we've been coordinating with some of our neighboring water providers on kind of regional responses.
Could you just say what that means when you say they reach out to people? Like, what if somebody's on vacation and they had their sprinklers on and the head, you know, explodes? What happens?
So it sort of depends on the specific situation. So, I mean, we're not able to respond in like a situation that if you had a pipe burst in your house, we're not going to be able to reach you before you're flooded. Basically what we're seeing is if there's a pattern of continuous use, like, so if your meter's not kind of going to 0 at some point overnight, it generally means that there's something leaking in the house, and that will trigger an alarm. And if we have a phone or email contact, we'll use that. Depending on the specifics, we may put something in the mail. Unfortunately, it seems like the mail is taking a really long time to get to people. But we're kind of, historically, we've just done that informally in whatever way seems like the quickest way to reach people. We do when something is like broken in the middle of the night, which happens, or we go through periods where people's backflow preventers get stolen for the copper and there's water just spraying everywhere. And in those cases, we usually get a call from the police in the middle of the night, and we go out and we turn off the system and contact the people the next day, and it gets turned back on once they've been able to make a repair. So it sort of just depends on the time of day and the specifics and how we find out.
And one of the things, I don't know if some of the newer council members know, but utility billing used to be in the finance department, and about a year ago, a little while ago, we moved it up to public works, specifically where, you know, we had the data and the billing, so we could better tie all of that. So they've been really working on a lot of process improvements through that. So it's one of the items where I thought we could use those data synergies and not just have finance just process bills, but really have staff that knew how the system worked.
Thank you.
And there's some other supply-side response strategies that we've identified. You could look at leasing short-term supplies, or, we have some interconnects with our neighboring water providers, just really sort of identifying what those strategies could be. Kind of the bigger impact side, really, when we're looking at reducing water use is the demand side. And that's, reaching customers and, city practices through restrictions. Again, this isn't meant to be read, but just kind of, a snapshot of what's in the plan, sort of highlighting that we have these response strategies in the plan, where we really lay out sort of what's, the normal activity and what happens in stage 1 and how does it elevate. A lot of these restrictions, there's about 26 customer restrictions, are activities that we're already doing, and we just kind of amp them up with each stage. And again, the city is, a big water user as well, so we have some city-specific water restrictions and practices that we've identified in the different drought stages. A number of different sort of goals for the city use, city vehicle washing, things like that, but also our parks and golf course and their water use, and we have targets in each of those stages, and we've been working very closely with them, and they've really been working hard. We've actually, for the first time, developed water budgets to work with this year as a strategy for reducing water usage. And then we have just some city response activities, different programmatic responses that we could look to doing in all these different stages, maybe increasing certain rebates or incentives, or, if you get into some higher stages, maybe looking at, some partnerships for some maybe indoor related water savings techniques. And then kind of the next steps that we'll get into is, so for the next about 2 weeks, we'll have the plan available on Lafayette Listens till May 15th for council to access. If you look here on the right side of the screen, this is what you'll see when you get there. On the right-hand side, there's 2 documents. One is the full plan, like is in your packet. And if you decide that maybe that was too much, you can do just the executive summary, which gives you kind of the overview of the plan and sort of the key tables. And that the way we really would love to get your feedback is we have a questionnaire. I got kind of cut off my picture, but the bottom of the page, there's a little click on a questionnaire, and you can take it, and that's when we can really get your feedback on kind of what, like, water efficiency programs you've heard of or feel are important. What are the values around water efficiency? And, when we're looking at water restrictions, we've identified some sort of non-essential water uses, and what are the priorities you feel those uses have. And then there's the opportunity to provide open feedback as well. So we have a way for you to just kind of provide open feedback on that website. And then kind of following that, there'll be sort of another plan revision, and then it'll go to public review. Probably early June, maybe late May through the end of July. And this is a required 60-day public review period. Again, it'll be on Lafayette Listens, but available to the public. We'll look at doing some sort of public presentation in June. July 10th, we'll be at the City Art Night Out booth. We'll look to other public events that might be appropriate to share the plan. And then we intend to do outreach to our neighboring water providers and to Northern Water about the plan. And then our final steps, following that 60-day review period, after the state reviews the plan at that same time, we'll kind of take all of that, we'll prepare our final plan, and the final plan will come back to council at the end of the summer for adoption by resolution. And once that plan is adopted, it'll go to the state for final approval. And we'll continue with our implementation of the water efficiency programs. Again, it's a 7-year cycle, so we'll be back in 2032 to do it again. And then there's likely municipal code updates needed for implementing aspects of drought response. And that's the end.
Amazing. Councilor Jensen.
So the municipal code updates, would those be integrated with the land use code, or are they separate from the land use code?
It'd be separate.
Thank you, this is so helpful and so thorough. I do have a question that I'm hoping you can do a little research on, because it will matter to me long-term in my approval, which is, I note in the dry plan, you have a phase, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, where community gardens would not be allowed. And in my experience with community gardens, these are people who don't have land of their own, so they're gardening in the community on community-owned land, and they tend to be lower-income people. And I also know that Sister Carmen encourages people to plant a row to help Sister Carmen have enough fresh food in the summer. I would not like to see those stopped if that could be done, and I would love to know how much water they are using and how significant a problem that might be to the community. And if it's not very significant, I would really hate to stop that, because I think they're feeding people. And also, as a gardener, I bring a lot of produce to Sister Carmen, and when I go there, I see lots of other people do too. And so it's a part of feeding our community. And in our equity frame that we talked about when we had our retreat, I think it's really important that we not deprive people who are using gardens for their food supply if we can stop that.
I think offhand, it's probably, I think, it's not in, wouldn't be in stage 2.
It's stage
I think it's stage
It's
3,
stage
and
3.
it's probably with, it's limiting it probably to like drip or hand
No, it
watering.
says not allowed.
So we
3?
might need to put in the exception for drip and hand watering in it, because we put that language in for some other.
That'd be great. If you had the exception for hand watering and drip, that'd be great.
Yeah. And then in stage 4, just because that's emergency, that's kind of, outdoor watering.
Stage 4 is a type of drought we have not seen in Colorado. That's like a crisis situation, so.
Councilor Gianella.
You mentioned neighboring municipality interconnections. And I like to hope that Lafayette is leading the pack. And so how does this plan address, should our neighbors come to us and say, we need water?
So the interconnects are probably most useful like for infrastructure failure, short-term situations. So we have an interconnect with Erie and we have an interconnect with Louisville.
Yep.
And we have periodically activated those in emergency situations. But in terms of a broader drought resiliency, it's not necessarily something that's going to be helpful because we all have really the same watersheds.
Yep.
So the odds of there being a year where our snowpack is great and theirs is bad is probably less likely. But
Our storage might be better. That's maybe what I'm wondering.
yeah, I mean, and it does depend, but it's most useful. Like we've had issues where we have a power outage or there's a fire
I
or
didn't
a piece of
understand
equipment
that, so
breaks.
that's helpful.
And that's mostly where those come into play. And it could help in a pinch, but it's not. None of us really have the ability to fully float an extra city for any extended period of time.
Fair. Thank you.
Councilor Fridland.
Thank you. I'll echo that this is really great work. Just thank you so much. Obviously, a lot of folks are talking about drought right now, and so I think hopefully those same folks will watch this and feel at ease. I have a couple questions. So the ranges, the reduction ranges, they're very big. I guess, why are they so large? And also, what's the basis for those ranges? You mentioned stage 1, I think, and sort of why we 10% and then 17% for outdoor, and I can kind of see how that echoes in the formula, where if we're at 0.9. But like the other ones, do they follow the formula in that same way that the triggers equal the reductions needed? Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah,
Just
they
wrong
do. And why we have large ranges, just because each drought is unique. The challenges are unique to each one.
Yeah.
And so the ranges are built in there to allow a certain level of operational flexibility and really identify where is the community at, how severe is this shortage, when does this occur? Is this something that's more of major concern in the middle of the summer versus the beginning of the summer? And there's just so many different things that go into play there.
So like if we had a stage 2, we would communicate stage 2, and then we wouldn't necessarily be communicating our desired reduction goal. That's more of a, let's choose from our options to get to 20% or to get to 25%, depending on what we need to do based on what's going on. Did I understand that correctly?
That's not clearly articulated in the plan. I think that's intentionally in terms of how it's messaged to the public in general, but from an operational standpoint, that is these are guidelines
Yeah.
of where to be operating within, and there's very much flexibility. If you're operating between 10 to 25, you might want to say, hey, we want to go 15% given this situation, but there's that flexibility.
So the other thing that factors into this is a lot of the kind of the guidelines and enforcement tools are fairly crude because they were based on not really having real-time data.
Right.
And so now that we have real-time data, that's going to give us an opportunity to understand what water savings certain tools are producing in close to real time. And as we get that available to customers, that I think it gives us a lot more room to finesse that, because if we tell someone to reduce their water by 25%, but they don't know until a month later how much water they use, that's sort of a difficult ask. So a lot of these things have really been geared at simplicity. And so we're kind of in a stage now where we've got an opportunity to see what kind of reduction we get out of those fairly simple tools, right? We've asked people to do certain things. We can now look at the data and see as a whole how that moves the ball, and then ideally as we move forward and update the ordinances, we better factor in that we have a lot more technology, right? It used to be you do even and odd numbers because that was the only way you could really tell, who was using water, and we now have, ability to see what time of day people are using water.
That's really helpful. I also, along that same vein, I feel a little bit as we talk about well, first of all, when you said 5 days a week watering, 7 as an example, I was like, God, is somebody out there watering 5 days a week?
believe it.
We have some
But I know who live in the neighborhood.
fairly ridiculous
Tell by the grass, Yeah.
uses,
Yeah.
to the point that it's very concerning.
Actually, when I started
Um,
seeing the meter data.
I mean, we have people that pay thousands of dollars a month
Sure.
for their water bill. And again, one of our concerns is as we move into enforcement, if you're comfortable paying a couple $1,000s a month
what's
for your water bill, a $50 fine might be the cost of doing business. So we're going to continue to try to refine those tools as we move
Yeah.
forward.
Along that same line, I'm thinking that our basis for how many times a week maybe is outdated too. I don't know. Maybe outdated is the wrong word, but maybe we're thinking of it from man, people can water 3, 4, 5 days a week now, so let's get into 2. When really it's what actually does I would say maybe a typical or reasonable sort of property need 2 days a week? Going from that way
Like
to
a
say
water budget?
what do
Yeah.
we need to do, and starting there rather than what are people sort of used to doing, and let's try to bring them back a little bit. Obviously,
So you're talking about water budgets.
is that what a water
Yeah.
budget is?
Yes.
Okay.
That is something that Lafayette it's in the plan as something to consider. You can do everything from making some high-level assumptions of what the average square area is of a parcel, and then how much of that is irrigated.
Yeah.
All based on assumptions, down to actually taking GIS data and customizing every individual water budget, right?
Yeah.
And then that spans is done in various levels of sophistication across the Front Range with different providers.
Yeah.
So it's something that you can speak more to in terms of how you want to explore.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in a place that had a water budget rate structure, and it requires a far more advanced utility billing system
Yeah. Yeah.
than we have, and it's fairly complicated to administer.
Yeah.
So it's something, as we look at replacing the billing system, if we find something that that can accommodate that, it's something that we could certainly move forward to.
And maybe we could get there in a much more blunt way, right? To say like, look, the default is 1 day a week. This year, it's looking like the water is going to be really good, so we're going to allow everybody to do 2 days a week. Congratulations, right? Rather than, hey, you can do 5 and let's try to get you back to 2 if we're in a crisis.
I mean, I think some of it is based on kind of what is best for the health of the things you're watering.
Right.
Like, so
Yeah.
watering thoroughly twice a week, I think,
Right.
is better than
Right.
watering lightly. And Dennis could probably articulate that more eloquently than I can. But I think some of it is based on kind of what is actually the most efficient and requires the least, but it doesn't necessarily get at, are you watering for 12 hours, 3 days a week, or are you watering for
Well, yeah.
2 hours,
too.
3 days a week?
Yeah. Yeah, I just have a comment too on the formula, and this is just maybe to think about in terms of the communication of it. I look at it, and honestly, I'm not confused by the formula itself. The formula makes sense, but I am confused by the inferences that we make from the formula, how that informs the decisions that we make. Like my initial just reaction from it is like, it feels like if we're at 0.9 and we go to a 10% reduction goal, we're gonna be in trouble quick. I don't know if that's true, right? Like, probably isn't, but like, it feels to me like maybe it should be like trying to look ahead or look around the corner of, if we're at a 0.9 and then we're asking for a 10% reduction, which we're not gonna get a 10% reduction, right? We're gonna get a 5% reduction. Then we're in trouble, right? So if we're at a 0.9, we should be asking for a 20% reduction. I know it's not that simple.
Yeah, and I may not have been that clear, but that 0.9 is our projection. That's looking at what we
It's
will
looking
be at
Yeah.
come November 1. We could be at a 1.2 today, or, so it is a look ahead. It's so if things continue as like the demand continues
Yeah.
at a certain level and our water rights are projected to yield a certain amount and our storage is at this level, it kind of factors together to project where we will
Right.
be in, the end of the water year, basically.
And it
that-
sort of
And you're just
changes a little.
representing it on the page too, right? Like you said, it's this massive
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
yeah, it's
with
hard
31
to
tabs.
verbalize in a.
And I'm sorry.
No, I mean, and the urgency, I think, changes over the course of the summer, right? So if, we've had unusually high use early in the year, but if we get
Right.
into July and August, and like, that's when we're traditionally burning through a lot of water, and we need to be able to move much more quickly in those scenarios.
Right.
And then flip side, things seems to be
Right.
sort of shifting in our favor in terms of a wetter summer, so we also don't want to overreact and destroy landscape,
Yeah.
and then it ends up being that it's a wet summer and
Yeah.
it wasn't necessary. So there's kind of a lot of variables, and they're going to continue to evolve over the course of the year. And it's also kind of an adventure to be implementing a plan that the ink's
We
kind
gotta
of still
test it
wet
on the
on.
fly.
Yeah.
So-
That wasn't
Building.
I would just say back to the communication point that I would make, that like, I think it's just, people don't, they're gonna see that and they're not gonna understand. And so, I don't know, just thinking through how to communicate that clearly so that people do understand that, hey, this is like a future projection and we're trying to, and it's not this, we're trying to explain it to you in one formula, but there's a lot more to it
Right.
too. I don't know, just a
Yeah,
just a
and each
comment.
time we look at it, it's a shorter period too. So it's until we get to November 1st, and then we're looking for a full year again. So it kind of,
Right, because it's based on the water year.
yeah, it's based on the water year, and it's based on kind of each sort of check-in period. So
Interesting.
yeah,
So there's so much there.
there's a lot there, and it's
Yeah.
hard to.
I don't know if that formula gives you enough credit for everything that's there. I think it's a good,
Yeah, it's very simple to say, but it's
Yeah.
hard to do.
yeah. Thank you.
Councilor Blair?
Thank you very much. I love the comment about the water budget and echo all the kudos. This is riveting. One thing, Director, I'm really curious about, you mentioned earlier, because we're a relatively small municipality, that with 10,000 households, that it would be difficult to grab one of those much more capable tools. Is it possible to do a joint venture with a neighboring town?
Yeah, we've looked at that actually in the past. We did some things with Louisville and Estes on our GIS. And actually our asset management system, and ultimately those have split off. We met with Louisville probably 4 or 5 months ago. They actually just outsourced their utility billing entirely. And that ended up not being a great option. As we talk to vendors, if we find something that works for Lafayette that someone else is using and we can leverage that to negotiate price, that's probably a more likely scenario. It kind of gets complicated in terms of everybody has their things that they want to customize. And so if it truly was a generic thing and we could have the exact same system as another community, that probably works pretty well. That it just becomes tricky when everybody wants their rate tiers a little different, or they want their water budgets set up different, or they do have storm or they don't have storm, or like we have trash gets billed on ours, so we need a system that can do that. So it's we're definitely talking to the neighbors, and that's also something that sort of comes up with when we do an RFP, RFI process, is seeing what other people are using. So definitely a possibility, definitely something we consider, but not at this point super clear whether that'll be the best option for us.
No, thank you. I really appreciate that. I think just building on some of Councilor Fridlin's remarks, so much of the access to residents and users that is currently very difficult for y'all seems to stem from that inability to get real-time data and then communicate it out with the push of a button rather than phone calls and emails and then manually looking. So very interested in how this proceeds.
The people that are pondering the formula are probably not the people we're having a hard time reaching.
Fair. Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Jensen?
Do we have any issues with HOAs in accomplishing this plan? I recently looked up what my HOA said about landscaping, and I think it said I had to have 50% grass in my front lawn, and it had to be kept green or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it said. How does this work with HOAs that might demand something that you can't achieve under certain restrictions?
That's everyone in the HOA would be under the same rules, so hopefully the HOA would take that into consideration. You wouldn't be able to use an HOA requirement as a free pass to not be responsible for meeting the ordinance. It's interesting, the HOAs themselves actually are some of our hugest users. We have a lot of irrigated decorative turf around town, and those are a shocking amount of water. At this point, at least with our ongoing restrictions, we haven't heard from a lot of people that have said, I'm getting in trouble with my HOA because I can't meet.
You'll cross that bridge when you get to it, is what I'm hearing.
I think so. I'm not sure what we really do with that, but I think if we let people who are part of an HOA not follow the rules, I don't think it works.
I know when the state passes a law, they have to actually go into the law regarding HOAs and also amend that law to make sure it complies with whatever other law they do, because if they don't, they cannot govern HOA's behavior. We don't have the authority to amend the law regarding HOAs, so that's why I was wondering if their law supersedes ours, their covenants supersedes ours without amending what it's called, the Common Interest Housing Act, I think is what it's called. Common interest is the word, but since we can't amend that, and they apparently have some authority to do certain things under that act, which prevails, their ordinance or, our ordinance or their covenants?
Their state statute.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's a state that supersedes it. This is what you bring up as an issue throughout Colorado. And there's just an educational gap at this point in time. So I think slowly over time, the HOAs will start to be much more educated and understand that, hey, this is a statute. We can't enforce you to put in Kentucky bluegrass if it's not, if the state is saying you can't. So, but that is slowly turning around. I know that Lafayette has been doing a lot of focused outreach with HOAs over the past few years, and planning on continuing to do so.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Jensen, for that entree to HOA. So my last recollection is that we have like 60% of our stock is single-family homes, I guess, is under HOA covenants. Does that sound?
I'm not positive.
Okay.
That's what I recall.
Okay, so forget that piece. So when we talk about restrictions and watering restrictions, is that, I don't know where this pans out, but are we talking about single-family homes or multifamily homes, or people who have lawns to water? It's, for the most part, going to be the bluegrass from single-family homes. Is that typically what we're looking at?
So typically with single-family homes, their individual lot is irrigated and off their meter to their home. And that generally includes the area between the sidewalk and the curb as well. And then they may have requirements of what that landscaping looks like under their HOA. Then we also have, so in a multifamily, it generally is all off one common meter. And then in a lot of the bigger residential HOAs, there's substantial common areas and decorative landscaping, and those are a separate thing. So the residential stuff, the single-family residential stuff is, there's only so much water people can use on a small lot. The bigger piece tends to be the HOA common areas.
So that's a significant,
Yeah, I mean,
Use of
and
our
just,
water.
I mean, a lot of the city was built in when that was kind of the look. And, right, and like grand entryways and boulevards and a lot of, just turf that's really there for decorative
thank you.
purposes.
That gets me to when someone said GIS and water budgeting. I'm like, okay, what are we talking about there? What does that look? Assuming we could use some kind of billing system that uses GIS to manage a water budgeting system, or
I'll
to
give you
inform
an
it?
example. So our neighbors to the west, each property has a lot size and an impervious area in their system. And each month you have a budget that it's based on, considering the average ET rate for that time of year, you get that much water at a base rate to use, and that presumably is enough for your indoor use and your outdoor irrigation based on, on GIS aerial photography, how much irrigable area you have. And if you go over that, if you go over your budget, there's a significant cost differential. We have that in a really roughly approximated way. We tried to set that tier 1 for kind of what a typical indoor use would be, and then, enough in tier 2 for kind of a average normal outdoor use. And then as you get into the other ones, it's progressing higher up. It's just we don't do it like specific by each lot.
But if we did it for these HOA common areas,
We could. What we've done, just because of, again, the sophistication of our system, their allotment in each block is based on their meter size. So basically when they came in, their demands were looked at and they were set at a certain size meter. And so if you're using more than kind of the average for that size meter, you get into the other tiers. So it's all just, it's set based on meter size, not based on an individual analysis.
Okay.
It's something we could look at in the future, particularly for irrigation accounts. It's just not something that we're really set up to do with our current technology.
Okay, last question. I like the formula, that's good formula in there. Are any of our, I don't know if we call them suppliers, NISP, and the places where we have water, do we ever get any input from them on the impact to their storage based on a drought? Let's say there's an extreme drought. Are they going to give us any information about how it's impacted their functioning or their supply?
No, totally.
Well, we get like for Northern Water, every year they set a quota for how much each unit will yield. And that's based on kind of the supply in their system and kind of sort of making sure they have supply going forward, but also providing the supplemental supply that like farmers and municipal suppliers need. So we do get that information on their systems pretty regularly.
And they are able to refine impact due to drought in those data? I mean, because there's seasonal variability and all kinds of other things,
Right, well, they have giant storage vessels, so they have a little bit more multi-year built in to their storage levels.
But they don't specify then to us how they're doing.
But no, they will. They'll let us know what their storage levels are,
Related to drought though, specifically.
like related to like what their current levels are. Yeah, we can find that information out and they'll share it. It's pretty public.
So we have to go into,
It might be on their websites.
but, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're public with their information.
And we actually, we both attended this year, but Northern Water does a big symposium before they do their announcement of their quota for the year. And they, get input from attendees, and that gets considered by their board in setting the amount
And
per
that's,
unit.
that's in the analysis that we do as far as what our supply would look like. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are a separate piece of the formula, and they're all a little bit different. So for example, Chimney Hollow, which has been in the news lately, we have shares of Windy Gap, but Windy Gap doesn't have very much storage and hadn't consistently been delivering the anticipated yield. So we and others participated in Windy Gap firming, which is creating Chimney Hollow so that Northern is able to more consistently deliver what was expected from that water right in kind of the ups and downs of the year. So it's definitely, we're in close dialogue with them, and we literally have to contact them and order deliveries.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, if you're curious, Northern's website has a lot of that data on it. In the State Division of Water Resources, you can find out water storage and water diversion rates like from all over the state. So it's just real time. So it's just kind of, if you like that stuff, it's kind of fun. You can even see our diversions on there.
Councilor Janela.
Just want to jump back to the HOA discussion briefly. In the last couple of years, the state did pass a law, an amendment to that Common Interest Community Act, basically limiting HOAs from issuing violations or fines for failure to comply with city watering restrictions that are put in place. They also did put in some laws about preventing HOAs from limiting installation of like a xeric garden, and they had to pre-approve at least 3 plans that were, a homeowner could automatically just get access to, and they didn't need to go to their review committee to put those in. So there's been some significant advances by the state in support of reducing outdoor irrigation and in view of HOA
If you have
concerns.
those statutes, will you send it to me?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think
Thank
my HOA basically looked at like some of the garden in the box and the Fort Collins or CSU had some plans and said, look, if you want to use some of these plans, knock yourself out. We don't want to develop a plan, so we're going to pick these ones that are already out there in the community and let you install those. And we've had various, homeowners who, one day you walk by and there's a grass removed and plants put in and new pollinator district sign that we're all happy about, so that's really good.
Northern also provides grant monies for turf conversions and particularly works with larger irrigators such as HOAs. So there is funding opportunity, and it's expensive to do turf conversions. And there is financial assistance out there if you go through that process.
My HOA did that last year, and I think we got about a 20% grant for the amount of grass that we removed and replaced with native grass. It's probably similar to what your grass will look like. I wanted to just jump back to the formula. I know it's forward-looking, and I think one of the things that I struggle with, and I know that the community struggles with, is kind of the immediate right now messaging. What is the situation on the ground right now? And I just want to understand, does the plan have in place kind of some of that immediate messaging that isn't necessarily forward-looking? It's the conditions on the ground right now, because I've had a lot of community members come to me and say, hey, this is like the worst drought we've ever seen, and why are we at stage 0? And I know we have moved into stage 1, and the thought, and I think this was a point that Councilor Fridland made a little bit of, we're being reactive and not proactive. Like we're seeing that the drought has come and it's been kind of going, and we're going to save in the future and not save right now. And I'm not sure if I'm stating this the way that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that are a little interesting. One is that the plan's not adopted, so the stages don't actually exist yet. And then the other quirky thing with this particular situation is that people started watering really, really early because we had warm weather really early. So the plans have sort of traditionally been set, usually May 1st is peak snowpack.
Right.
And so, what we've been trying to do is not confuse matters with whether you're watering 2 days a week or 3 days a week, because we're asking people not to water it all. So sort of putting out things to, no pun intended, dilute that message.
Yeah.
There's some strategy to that, and we do anticipate that shifting as we're getting close to May, and other places have shifted to wait till the middle of May or the end of May.
Yeah, and I guess the concept of kind of what is the situation on the ground right now, like that communication to the public maybe just needs to be amplified, especially when we're in situations like this where people don't know what, they say, well, it looks like we're in a drought, but there's no restrictions in place.
There's year-round.
I know that's not true, but to say to the public, actually, this is the worst drought on record, and kind of some of that immediate messaging. I don't know that it's part of the plan, and it's a separate conversation, but I'm getting it from a lot of sides that, well, why isn't the city doing more?
Well, it's important to remember every water provider is unique. They have unique water supplies, they have unique water rights, different storage capacities, a lot of different supplies. So it's not going to be like a unified response.
Of course.
But it is a unified drought. Like, you don't often see a drought hit the entire state. Usually it's a little more regional, or the entire West. There's some unification of just, we all have the same conditions, but sort of the response is unique to each water provider. And again, kind of the seasonality of, like, this really isn't irrigation season yet.
Right.
So there's a takeaway of that, and this probably isn't the place to do it, but as you look at this, if there are different ways that different nomenclature we could use, because what I'm hearing is what we're calling it in terms of the drought stage is important. And we have been trying to more focus on what we need people to do. And again, with the delay till May has been the focus.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's also important to people to have the broader context of,
Yes, we're in a drought.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it is weird because like stage 0 is mandatory restrictions and stage 1 is additional voluntary restrictions. So we haven't quite unpacked how to come up with a better nomenclature for that.
Councilor Bollier.
Thank you. Just want to sort of piggyback on this real quick. One thing, I think I agree with you, and I think maybe there's a building consensus that the nomenclature doesn't quite fit the purpose. And so that comes back to my earlier question in terms of the new comms director and how the different shops think about messaging that out. Because as I think we heard during the NISP conversation last week, the delay till May hasn't worked yet, right? We were hoping for 10% reduction under stage 1, and we didn't quite get that, unless I misheard.
We were hoping for more than 10% reduction because we're like, usage has been almost double normal.
Right.
And so that's what's tricky is, you know,
So there's
under
a-
normal
there's an issue right
circumstances,
now,
we'd be
right?
looking for 10%, but
Yeah.
the things that we would do in stage 3 to get that reduction don't really make sense.
Yeah. And so then I
in
think
March.
coming back to your point, Councilor Giannola, I'm seeing a delta, to use a pun, between the nomenclature we're using and what the public is hearing or confused about. And I don't have the answer, and I don't expect you to have the answer, but I do think bringing those together some way through a very clear communication. I love Eddie. I'm a big fan of Eddie, so that's exciting. But I would love to lean on the new comms director to help tell that story and boil it down, again, a pun, to something very focused so that the public understands what we're asking them to do. And then second point, I love the HOA conversation, and the draft plan is magnificent. I'm a huge fan of this. I do wonder if we could add like a block of text specifically for HOAs. You've woven HOAs throughout the document, absolutely. But just something that just hits this point, makes the point on kind of the precedence of the water ordinances over HOA regulations in a non-judgmental way, like just a call-out box, just so folks can see that and be like, oh, okay. Because again, HOAs are woven throughout, but I think a call-out box might help with this comms piece just for the, I think, almost majority of residents in the city that live in HOAs. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that, and I will hit on just reinforcing, because you will start to hear from the public. We are ramping up enforcement because the people that are paying attention to the messages are already kind of probably doing the right stuff. And so I think that's going to be the leverage, is it was trying to be, maybe not carrot, but now it's definitely going more into it. And then that's when you'll hear people complain about that. So just be prepared for that as well.
Councilor Jess.
Do we have a mailing list for all the HOAs in our community? Do we send out stuff regularly? So we don't even know.
We, the work that sustainability did when we were doing a lot of the outreach to HOAs, we've got lists that it is hard because they do change management companies. So it's not like they don't supply it to us proactively, but I know that we've done some work and have lists-ish. But I know that also through that work, Director Boken, I want to say Zora still, sorry, I can't, it's been like 2 years, has done a ton of outreach and gone personally to those HOAs and talked through it. So if you have one that you're interested in, or if your neighbor, have a friend that has one, like have them reach out to us.
And there is a statewide list, I noticed, because I was trying to find mine, I couldn't find it, and I looked on the statewide list. But in the table 7.2 in the attachment A draft plan, there's a communication initiatives, many elements to it, and I think many of them are really good, but I have said several times before that I think our communication strategy has in the past consisted of trying to drive people to city resources instead of reaching them where they already are, which is why I was asking about the HOA. Could we, my HOA sends out a letter periodically after every meeting and tells the public what's going on. And so if they're telling me and the city's telling me, we're repeating it. And other places, like not just our social media page, but the page of groups and entities in the community that Lafayette Rocks, Lafayette on the Verge. I can't remember all the Lafayette related Facebook or social media pages, but I think we need to do more of, there are people for whom driving people to our website is the right approach, and then there are people who will never do that. So we just got to try to find a way to reach them more. And so if we could send something out to the HOAs, I think that'd be helpful, and other strategies that are more finding them instead of them finding us.
Yep. Your May workshop is looking to be real robust when we talk about our communication plan. So I think if we have more of the plan for tonight, that'd be great, but I know we do have another big presentation as well. So, and you'll have an entire opportunity to provide feedback on Lafayette Listens
One
as
more
well.
thing, I want to repeat something I said last time, that in the absence of this being an approved plan, which isn't until August, that we are acting as if what we have here is what is governing us. I just want to make sure that is still what, so the public knows that this is the potential for how, if the drought gets really bad, this is sort of what we will proceed with, even assuming we don't have an approved plan.
Yep.
Great. Well, just to echo everyone's thoughts, really, really appreciate this, the thoroughness, and really just great work. Thank you.
We'll take a moment to get reorganized real quick. Nope. Names matter. Not gonna rely on Alex.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Should have brought
Time is done.
One question.
All right. Ready.
They've all answered that.
We're,
You want me to rouse them?
yeah.
It's unbelievable. I want to see that confirmed.
Hi, Ron. I think we're good. So far, you did a great job.
Thank you. I was just testing, make sure we're good.
All right, the majority of us are here, so I will turn it over to.
Let's get started. All right. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Megan Davis, Deputy City Manager. We're going to talk this evening about emergency management and resilience planning. And first, I'm here tonight with Chief Pete Bradshaw, our Fire Chief, and Lizzie Bacone, our Sustainability Director. And just want to acknowledge that this is a much broader topic than those of us who are sitting here today. So we also have, a couple of folks here from our Parks and Open Space Department who are involved in working on these issues as well. So Melissa Heisel, Community Services Director, as well as Dennis Warrington. And Lexi was here earlier, but she's also contributed to this, our open space superintendent. And then, of course, Chief Brian Rosapalia as well, and many others throughout the organization, including our public works team. So obviously, these topics, emergency management and resilience planning, tie in across the entire organization. So we're going to specifically be talking around emergency management in the capacity of our kind of emergency manager and emergency management planning role, as well as resiliency and kind of the nexus between those and the efforts that we're undertaking that we have in place across the organization around emergency management and resilience. So we'll talk a little bit about the emergency management structure and kind of our role as a city within that broader structure. And then we're going to talk a little bit about an overview of current efforts, both around emergency management as well as resilience, some next steps, and then we'll have some time for questions. So I want to talk a little bit about how we've been sort of looking at this from a organization-wide perspective and really kind of a citywide perspective. When we look at what our goal is, we're really kind of looking broadly at both of these kind of issues, emergency management and resilience, and how we can work to create a resilient Lafayette. And so what we see that looking like is building social and community resilience, and how we work together to do that, how we work to build more resilient landscapes and a more resilient environment, and how we work on our built environment and a more resilient built environment. And so these are kind of the three key areas that we've been focusing and working around, and we're going to talk specifically about kind of what we're doing and where we're going in those areas. So a little bit of emergency management background before I turn it over to Chief Bradshaw. So when we talk about emergencies and building resilience, we're really taking an all hazards approach. And so we're talking about kind of the whole gamut of potential hazards and emergencies that we might encounter as a community. So this could be anything from natural hazards, natural disasters like flooding, severe weather, drought, wildfire. Those are kind of the top hazards that we experience here in our environment. Infrastructure failure, that's something that's that can occur as well. Obviously, power outages, the PSPSs that are now kind of coordinated or planned or orchestrated power outages are something that are becoming more familiar in our communities. And then human-caused hazards are something that we also may encounter. We've encountered cyber attacks here in our community or here at the city, and then climate impacts as well. Some of these can be considered more micro disasters or more major disasters, just depending on what they look like. So that could be extreme heat and cold, drought, or kind of a loss of seasonality that we've been seeing. And obviously we just talked about the drought plan, so that's an important piece of that when it comes to our water and our planning around that. So in terms of the emergency management structures and how we fit in, the city does have a role in emergency management, but we are one piece of the puzzle in terms of emergency management and response. And as you know, we can't be wholly responsible for all emergency management functions or all emergency management, kind of response, preparedness, and recovery. It's just not feasible for us to have the capacity or the ability to have everything in place around those pieces. So we really have to depend on all of these different layers to support us and to partner with and to collaborate with in order for us to be successful in building resilience and in building the emergency response capacity that we need to be prepared and to be equipped for any kinds of disasters that might occur. So it really starts at the federal level with FEMA, and we think a lot around what might happen in the instance of an event and how we might respond, but also in terms of preparedness. And this might be thinking about the resources that would be available, federal funding that would be available, like grants we might apply for, pre-disaster mitigation funding. We actually have just applied for some federal funding for congressionally designated funding, which I think was it in the pre-disaster mitigation bucket? I think so. It was in the pre-disaster mitigation bucket for some support for the fire station. But obviously, federal is kind of the top level if there's an event, and even to support pre-disaster support if we wanted to do kind of a big infrastructure type project around pre-disaster mitigation, we could look at some support there. The state is a huge partner in response if we have a disaster, especially one that would cross jurisdictions or that would be something that couldn't be managed at the local or county level. The Public Safety Department and DHSEM, the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management Department, has they would help as a partner in responding to that, as well as some other departments like the Department of Local Affairs. And so they would be an agency that would then provide that state level support.
I thought DHS was a federal agency. How's that?
Department of Homeland Security is also a federal agency, but the state level DHSEM is our sort of state partner in response for emergencies.
Is it under the federal agency?
No, it's just the name of the state agency is also called DHSEM. Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. So it's not governed underneath the federal agency, it's governed at the state level. Yeah. But
Ran out of
they,
acronyms.
yeah. Yeah, anything else to add there?
No.
Yeah. They probably get funding from the federal level directly through to the state level from the Department of Homeland Security funding for the state administration. I don't know what the, what kind of grant funding they might get from the federal agency at the state agency, but that's the title of the state agency. Yeah.
While he's interrupting you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I had a question on the very first slide that I
Okay.
didn't get in because I was walking in the door. In the social and community resilience, what does that mean?
We're going to get there.
Okay, all right, I'll wait.
Yeah. We have more details to come. Good
Okay.
question. And then want to talk a little bit about the county Office of Disaster Management and EOC. You'll see both of those acronyms when it comes to talking about Boulder County's role. The used to be called the Office of Emergency Management, and now they call it Office of Disaster Management, which is sort of the department or the agency. If there's an event, the EOC is activated, and that's the Emergency Operations Center. So that's run by, or it's an arm of Boulder County, and they are a partner with us, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the City of Lafayette, we have our own emergency manager here in Lafayette, which is Chief Bradshaw. And he works with the organization to help us be more prepared as an organization. So I just want to talk about Boulder County real quickly because again, we don't have the capacity to have all of the resources and systems in place, nor would it make sense for every municipality within Boulder County to have their own fully equipped, staffed, trained, kind of department and organization to have our own kind of emergency operations center at that level. Boulder County, actually, the counties are statutorily required to have an Office of Emergency Management. And so Boulder County, they are, in the Boulder County Office of Emergency Management is in place to help us prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters and large-scale emergencies, particularly if multiple municipalities or jurisdictions are involved, and also to help us with things like all hazard planning, which is underway right now. Pete's going to talk a little bit about that, and building relationships across jurisdictions to help with disaster management and resiliency across the county, and also to work with our state partners and our federal partners as well. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Pete to talk about the city and our structure.
All right, thanks. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. So just kind of, moving on from the county into the city of Lafayette, we do have a really robust relationship throughout the county. I don't think any municipality or the county plans on approaching emergency response and or recovery individually. We're always pretty well connected. So we're lucky in that way. Boulder County's had its share of disasters over the years. So we have a pretty good backbone and a pretty good structure set up. So the way we approach emergency management in the city is to really leverage the expertise we already have. We run a very unique business with lots of wings and arms and divisions and groups. So what we try to do is just leverage what we're already good at, to help us through emergency management. So we don't end up kind of deploying a classic emergency operations center look and feel. It's really more taking what we already know how to do and doing it well or doing it in an emergency tempo. And so we just kind of highlighted here in this graphic kind of how this works out. The city manager's office really is the link between the community and the council and the operation that's going on, but we're trying not to bog down their office with those operations. Their job is to communicate and guide communications and that sort of thing. So we would have an incident commander out underneath them. These are all divisions we already have, right? We do logistics every day in the city, so we just flip that card over and they just do it at a different tempo while we're doing this. So it's a pretty simple strategy. What we think we really like about this, because we haven't really tried it in full scale yet, is that it's very scalable. If we need open space to be involved, we fold them in. If we don't need them to be involved, we fold them out.
we get the right people in the room, and we're leveraging technology and being able to do this remotely. We've used it a number of times for the public safety power shutdowns, and it's worked very well. It's very agile. It responds quickly. We add people to meetings quickly. We take them off quickly. It's been very effective. So we're happy with this model, and we just continue, look for opportunities to exercise it and look at after action it and see how it worked. So this slide just really highlights some of the roles of what we have going on. So the left side of the slide are those of us that are engaged in emergency response all the time. It's our bread and butter, so it works out pretty good. Chief Rosa Palia and I, Chief Basher formerly, we have a pretty good handshake agreement. We understand that some emergencies could be fire department heavy, in which case the police department would take a more active role in emergency management. And likewise, on an event that's a little more law enforcement heavy, fire would take a heavier role in emergency management. So we're lucky to have that relationship, especially in a kind of smaller organization. Chief Rosa Palia and I are lockstep on that, as are our deputies and commanders. So the right side is just, again, kind of talking about how we would fold in different pieces of the city to make different things happen. So obviously Lizzie is here tonight on the sustainability side, and I think what you're going to see is disasters kind of breed recovery, which breed resiliency, which change habits, and that's where the prevention side of this kind of comes in. We list out Public Works specifically here. That group does a lot of emergency response also. They're obviously, sometimes they don't wear capes, but they're out in the middle of the night in snowstorms just like police and fire, and for hours on end. So they're also really good at ramping things up very quickly and responding. So they're very much an important part of what we do. And then I kind of mentioned the city manager's office, keeping the strings on the policy and financial decisions, but also keeping you all educated, informed of what's going on, and controlling the community outreach portion of the city. So I used a picture here that couldn't happen here just so we wouldn't get tied up in something that has happened. So this slide really is just to kind of talk about when things happen, the tempo that occurs, and how things kind of morph from response all the way over to preparedness, so we're better off next time. So, in this particular incident, there were cars on the bridges, there were lives lost, unfortunately, and this is a very heavy police and fire event for a relatively short period of time, maybe 12 hours, right? And then it became a Public Works issue, and then it became a highway department issue, and then it became engineers and all kinds of things, right, to undo this disaster. So it's not unlike any other disaster you can picture. You get to grab bag the disaster of your choice and apply the same logic. So as we get done with this, right, we never want to waste a disaster. We want to learn from it. We want to be better prepared next time. So as we start to get to the recovery phase, that's where we're hoping that our resilient community who's already prepared to have these conversations can really look at changing habits, so they're better prepared next time, right? About how the best person to prepare for a disaster is you. If you take care of yourself and you take care of your neighbors, we've taken care of all the community twice, right? If everyone takes care of themselves and one neighbor. So that's kind of what we're looking for, is start to build those habits out of recovery. We saw it from the Marshall Fire, and I have some examples later, but we saw where people learn from that and don't want that to happen again. And so what can they do to learn from that? And unfortunately, it fades over time, right? We just forget, but we get reminded, unfortunately, is the nature of this business. So that's kind of, that's how I picture, the fire department responding to an emergency management, and how we get over to the resiliency and sustainability side of our city. And we're lucky that we do all three of those things very well. So just highlighting some of the things we're doing or have done in emergency management recently. We are currently working on updating the 2022 Boulder County Hazard Mitigation Plan, or the HMP. By the way, this presentation could be all acronyms, just to let you know, the whole thing. So we're looking at updating that. It's a good plan. Every municipality in the county has an annex. Again, to speak to our relationship with the county. We don't have to write our own annex. They hired the consultant. They're taking data from us and weaving it into the plan. Again, it's a little unique in terms of county and city cooperation, so we're lucky that way. We're adding a few things in terms of infrastructure and hazards we know of, but generally it was pretty well captured in the 2022 plan. So last year we added the outdoor warning system, an improvement from the old 1980s or 90s rotating, spinning siren devices. Hopefully you heard some of them. They tested it on the first Monday of every month, starting in April. It is impressive. It covers about 80% of the community. If you're outdoors in about 80% of the town, you should be able to hear that with some reliability. Again, it doesn't provide all the information, but it gives you some clue as to what's going on, as opposed to just the siren previously. So these are a huge benefit, and we're working on phase 2 of these, which is local control for specific needs. So they're in our parks, and so if we feel like lightning is close and it's near a ball field where we're playing baseball with aluminum bats, we can activate these locally. So that's the next phase of this technology. It's very exciting. We started working on a continuity of government plan. Megan and I looked at a number of plans out there. We found a couple that we thought were a good pattern. Our approach really is a continuity of government plan that overarches the highest level of the city of Lafayette, and then every department or every working group having a continuity of operations plan underneath that. So it's something they can control, they'll be ready, and they all dovetail into the continuity of government plan. The real crux of that plan is to deconflict what's the most important thing all the way down to the least important thing, because there is nothing that's not important, right? So having to rank those and come up with those pre-planned priority lists is probably the crux of this, is what we've kind of learned. So we continue to work on a crisis communications plan, and hiring the new communications director. That was one of the aspects we looked at, was adding public information officer to communications and how we can accomplish it at best. So we look forward to that. And then speaking of things that have come out of the Marshall Fire, the evacuation planning is something that's taken many great steps in the right direction since that event. It got its own slide. So what you see on the right here is the city of Lafayette divided into a bunch of what we call polygons, which are shapes with multiple sides. You probably already know that. I had to learn that. So this allows, this functions, this sits in police cars, fire engines as a job aid, so that the first arriving police sergeant or fire lieutenant or fire battalion chief can pull out this electronically or on paper and figure out which areas need to be evacuated, and in seconds can relay that information to the communications center, and those evacuations go out in minutes. The old pattern was to say, hey, here's 4 streets, evacuate this area in this square. As you can imagine, that takes a lot of time. It also asks a frontline responder to take time out of what is no doubt the most complex part of an incident, which is the beginning, to make this happen. So we tried to streamline it for first in responders to make this decision. So from these polygons, then we talk kind of about the notification pathways. So when we send out an emergency notification, an alert, an awareness, anything shy of an order, this is the pathway. It goes out through BOCO Alert, which is a registration system, right? Everyone should be signed up for it. You can add up to 5 addresses. So if you want to put home and work and maybe your kid's school or whatever you want to do, you can put up to 5 addresses in here. If that address is inside a polygon, you're going to get an alert however you chose to get that alert. You're also going to get all the landlines in that area, whether you're on plain old copper, we call it, plain old telephone systems, whether you're on copper or have a home phone through Xfinity now. Those are both in the system. You're going to get those. And the third thing you're going to get is the emergency alert system, which is a little antiquated but still present in some homes in terms of a stripe across the bottom of your TV or interruption to your radio. I can't say those are 100% reliable, so we really encourage everyone to go to BOCO Alert, get registered, get signed up, add the addresses that are important to you, it allows for early and instant notification when this thing happens. So the other thing that happens, I know, animations, right? The other thing that happens is an emergency order. So the best example of this is an evacuation order that we have determined. It does all those things in the orange boxes as well, but it also uses a process we call wireless emergency alerts, or IPAWS is another term you might hear. This is what you probably know and love as the Amber Alert. That's the technology that's used. What that does is we ask the cell providers to say, hey, everybody inside this geographic location, we'd like to notify them. And they decide which towers to send it out on. So we gain a ton of contact, but we lose a lot of accuracy. It's a much broader messaging. And so when we do that, we're a little more careful about what the order says. So we take an extra minute or two here to make sure the message is as clear as it can be in a given amount of characters. And then we also help you get to the next place to find out more information. So it does take a little bit longer just because it's a little less specific. A lot of people are going to get this, and there's anomalies, up to 50 miles away where things get, into weird things. I don't understand that technology, but that's kind of the two ways we do notifications based on these polygons. We can also do the old-fashioned notification by drawing a circle around an area or picking a neighborhood. Law enforcement sometimes will really want to dial down like a shelter-in-place order or something like that, so they can still get very specific. But in general, we try to use these polygons, at least for the first out responders.
And I think this is really important for residents to know. You have to be signed up in order to get an evacuation notice. You can sign up for multiple addresses with work, like if you're at your work address or your home address, or you can put multiple addresses because otherwise you won't get notification.
Do we have a sense of roughly what percentage of the town is registered?
I could get that for you. It's shockingly small. Yeah, countywide, it's a surprisingly small number. Yeah.
It'd be a really good thing for us to push on.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of already touched on this. We're working on that continuity of government plan. With any luck, I think we'll see that early 27. It's a very intensive process. So we're trying not to skip any steps, but for a guy who likes things to happen right now, it takes a while. So, yeah. So questions on the emergency management side before I hand it over to Director Picone?
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. Could we go back to the pod map? And I can't.
Which map?
The slide with the
polygons. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Polygons. Yeah. So I'm looking at this map, and I understand that it's more than likely based on the density and ways of getting in and out.
Yep.
And I think I see 287.
Yep.
It looks like there's blue wrapped around a set of residences. Yeah, next to LA 12, below LO, to the left. Right there. So I'm assuming that they're covered by that is covered by the county? Is that how that works out?
Yeah, good question, actually. Thank you. I've seen this map so many times, it makes perfect sense to me. So what you see on the bottom left is you see some polygons with LO in them. Those belong to Louisville. The top left, BC 21, that's a Boulder County polygon, so they're responsible for it. It's just when Commander Sellers and I kind of sat down with the city of Lafayette, we said exactly that thing. How many people are in this square or this polygon? How are they going to get out? And where are the natural barriers? 287 is a natural barrier between pretty much the whole city. So we kind of took those major thoroughfares and started carving it up. And we talked about the likelihood of things getting from one to the other. Ultimately, in a perfect evacuation scenario, you would evacuate a small number of people in sequence so you wouldn't get everybody on the road at the same time. The reality and the practice in emergency management said is it doesn't work because we're too smart. We have too much information, and we all kind of get the same information simultaneously that bad things are about to happen. So evacuation happens in mass, and it's almost impossible to control otherwise. So it's been tried by a couple different systems in different places with very, very mediocre results. So, yeah.
I had another question, like, I don't know how this is gonna sound, but most bad stuff starts in the west,
Yeah.
in Boulder.
Yeah.
Not because it's Boulder.
Oh,
but, I mean.
coincidentally, yeah.
Yeah, can we delete the last?
Yeah.
We're gonna be heading east, and that's not Boulder County.
Yep.
So we evacuated into Weld County, we evacuated into Broomfield County. I assume there's some understanding that people are coming their way to those counties.
It's the slide we had about kind of the feds, the state, the county, and the local. It is very rigid in emergency management. And so once we get to this county, they're already on the phone with the state and they're helping us share that information. There's 52 counties in the state still, is that right? Let's say 52-ish. Yeah, I'll say ish.
63.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, bunch, right? But the state has instant access to those emergency managers in each county. So you do have like this single point of contact county to county, and that's why that system works good. And that's why we try not to cross that barrier too much. So that would be a role of county ODM, is to notify the state, to notify other counties that, you're probably going to get an influx of people.
Okay.
And you probably have an emergency headed your way, so.
And the last thing, because Councilor Walton is not here, I'm going to say thank you, because I think 4 or 5 years worth of my being on council was the question, when are we going to get continuity of government plan? So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, we're very excited about it. It's been a fun project. It's just a lot, so, yeah. Yeah, you're welcome.
And I believe Councilor Genoa, do you have something?
Yeah, can you leave the map up?
You bet.
This is a really informative map. Is this shared with the community? It's the first time I've ever seen it. So my thought is, if an alert goes out and it says, LA 12, and someone knows that that's where I'm at, like there can be this kind of brain connection. So I don't know, that might be something that we think about. Can we number the sections of the town in a way that's communicated with the residents so that they can, know where they're at? Because, in the recent fire example that was in southwest of Lafayette, my neighborhood wasn't necessarily under an evacuation order, but it was the next neighborhood over.
Yeah.
And we packed our bags and left and maybe didn't need to and contributed to some traffic that was unnecessary. Had I known that it was, this section and not that section, and maybe some of the polygon information just didn't get communicated as well as it could have. That information could be helpful. I don't know if that's been talked about or discussed, but.
So we did talk about it. A major city on the south part of the state tried a system like that and tried to inform its residents on what polygon it was in. They divided their city into 600 something polygons. And I'm going to use kind of a crazy example here, but it's like having a decoder ring. When we start to encode a message, you have to be able to decode it. And so if we say, hey, this is going out to polygon LA 12, I don't really want you to think about if you're in 12 or not. We want you to know that there's an evacuation happening near you. If you're on BOCO alert, then you can kind of put 2 and 2 together. Because we would hate for the opposite to happen, which is like, I thought I was in LA 11, who knew? I think that's I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I worry about the flip side of it a little bit. It's not a secret map. It's not a map that we produce. It's not a map we hold public necessarily. It's up on the screen tonight, so it's not private. But it really drives early decision making for early incident commanders who don't have the time to develop a perfect map.
Yeah.
And so it is kind of imperfect in nature. Yeah, I'm definitely not opposed to sharing. It's certainly something we can kick around.
It's a good point, though, that it's sort of better safe than sorry, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, like the goal is that we have a safe community, not that we necessarily have an informed community.
Yeah, we would prefer over evacuation than under for sure.
Yeah.
Councilor Brother.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all so much for this presentation. I live in LA 12, so I appreciate the focus.
We knew that.
A few questions. One is I agree. I'm really interested in this. I very much take the point that forcing folks to decode might send them astray. But I know that there is a hunger, I've heard it from residents, I imagine many of us have, in terms of what should I do if then? And I wonder, and I know efforts have been made in the past, but I wonder today, excuse me, given the state of technology and given the focus on this flow chart of the notification pathways, what kind of messaging and communication are y'all thinking about to residents? Polygons aside, but if someone's like, gosh, that fire near Councilor Giannola is scary, what if there's a fire near my house, what should I do? Recognizing, to your point, Chief, that, well, it really depends on where the disaster is or what the other situation. Related to that, I know that we have the snow angels for, not that we get snow anymore, but we have efforts to help neighbors who may be unable to shovel their sidewalk. Is there any equivalent for an emergency natural hazard evacuation, whether tornado, fire, whatnot, so we check in on our neighbors? I mean, I keep an eye on my older neighbors for a variety of reasons, but just to make sure they're safe. But do we have a program to kind of track those folks with volunteers?
You know, we're going to talk about resilience, and part of resilience is that sort of building community and neighbor to neighbor. So I think we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I think, Lizzie, if you want to talk a little bit about how you and Delaney and our resilience trainee talks a little bit about preparedness, and, you know, if you see danger, don't necessarily wait for the evacuation if you feel like you're in danger, and what your response and reaction might be. So that will be, I think, in the next phase, and we'll take more questions.
Thank you. And then the last one, and I'm happy to table this one as well, but just really seized with how we really increase the percentage of our town's residents who are signed up for Vocal Alert, whether it's bombarding them with Director Arthur's water messaging and then also sign up for Vocal Alerts. But how can we make a collective full court press to really up the registrations?
Yes. Great. Okay. All right, we will move on to resilience. Okay.
All right, so I have the pleasure of sharing some of our current efforts, and I do want to stress that it's not all of our efforts. It just highlights some of the efforts by different departments. So first things first, I wanted to start out with a definition of community resilience. It's the ability of a community to prepare for, respond to, and recover from stressful events. This definition can be found in our climate action plan in the community resilience section. Effective emergency management strategies increase community resilience, but resilience is a collaborative effort, not only collaborative with city departments, but also in the community. Chief Bradshaw said it best earlier.
Get out. That rarely happens.
Where resilience starts with you. Are you prepared to respond to and recover from a stressful event? And that's really where we are building our social and community resilience. So the thanks. This was shared earlier with you all today. And I'm going to go through those buckets. So first, I'll start out with social and community resilience, then the built environment, and lastly, we'll go into the resilient landscapes and environment. So first things first, this is the social and community resilience. This is where we're really helping activate you to become more prepared to respond and recover from stressful events. We'll talk about community events and workshops, the community resource hub development, a neighborhood resilience toolkit development, and then we'll end it with our HEPA air purifiers program. So with community events and workshops, I wanted to share Earth Day Every Day is coming up this Saturday. Very excited. We have over 65 vendors attending the event, but it also coincides with Wildfire Preparedness Day. We have several vendors at this event that will be sharing resilience tips. Wildfire Partners will be there for wildfire resilience. Our fire department will be there with their brush truck to educate on prescribed burns. So there's a lot of opportunity for individuals to get information and increase their personal resilience. And since last year, the Sustainability Department, the Fire Department, and the Open Space Division have been hosting a Building Community Resilience workshops. This year, we've brought it back with 5 opportunities for residents to get information. The first was tonight. It ended at 7 for a home hardening 101 workshop led by the fire department. The next one will be in August and really will be focused on neighbors helping neighbors, and that will coincide with our development of our Neighborhood Resilience Toolkit. And as previously mentioned, there is a great need to get residents registered for BOCO alerts. So that emergency preparedness workshop that will be in September to coincide with National Preparedness Month will be a great opportunity for residents to attend and get signed up for that BOCO alert. So these are just some examples of what we are doing and hoping that individuals see these opportunities and come and learn to increase their own personal resilience. Next, we have the development of community resource hubs. Some of you may be familiar with this work that happened for the past 2 years. You may also be familiar with resilience hubs. The City of Lafayette has chosen to move forward with community resource hubs because it's more translatable in different languages rather than resilience hubs. But this is a facility that is enhanced to support residents and offer services and resources daily, as well as before, during, and after climate disasters, emergencies, and other disruptions. In the world of resilience hubs, which is generally still a newer concept nationwide, there's Blue Sky Day, which is more of your everyday function, your programming, and then there's that Gray Sky Day, which is more activated when you need power or food or warmth. And you might be asking yourself, what do these community resource hubs offer? There is a very set structure for these community resource hubs that, again, is being used nationwide, as well as some facilities here in Colorado. The first thing is resilient programming. This is more of that day-to-day function of offering programming such as that building community resilience workshops and getting information to residents. Then we also have resilient power, so that backup power. If there was a power outage, does that facility have the capability of continuing to run electricity? I won't go through all of these, but resilient structure is also incredibly important. Does the facility have HVAC? Can it cool? Does it have the ability to offer refrigeration for medication? Does the facility have the capacity to host pets? There's all these different components that go into a community resource hub that we're very excited about. The importance of Lafayette hubs is really to complement the county's leadership to further support residents before, during, and after micro disasters, especially those related to climate change. So there's some examples up on the screen. So extreme heat and cold snaps, power outages, and poor air quality. This is still in development. Last year, we made the decision to create a network of community resource hubs so that if, for example, Sister Carmen is identified as one of those community resource hubs, they don't have the capacity to host 150 individuals at their location, but they have the ability to communicate very effectively with residents. So that's how they would be activated. We've identified 5 so far in the city of Lafayette, but it will be a long-term process to get these hubs up to speed, especially with backup power. It is costly, so we are identifying funding sources and keeping our eyes open for opportunities to advance. And next we have the Neighborhood Resilience Toolkit. Very, very excited about this. So we have partnered with 3 Colorado University students to explore the development of a Neighborhood Resilience Toolkit. So we envision this toolkit to empower residents to map their assets, to get to know their neighbors, to understand what the available resources there are if there was an emergency, and also to identify projects within their own community to enhance resilience. This is, again, a relatively newer concept. There are some cities that have advanced a toolkit. This is an example of the San Antonio's Climate Ready Neighborhoods Toolkit that we gravitated towards. But it is a really great way to have neighbors, to talk to neighbors. I was at a conference and we did this assessment, and it was a group of 10 of us at the table, all professionals working in this space, and we were told to map our neighborhood. Who are our neighbors? What resources do they have? Only one person could name the actual name of their neighbor. It was more, this person has a dog, this person just had a child, but the connection and that social cohesion was lacking. So this toolkit is really meant to bolster that social cohesion and have individuals talk to one another, and it's not meant for the whole community at large. It can be your HOA, it can be your block of neighbors, it can just be yourself and your neighbor, yourself. So it's very versatile and tangible is what we're hoping for. So this is work that will begin in May, and really getting that community feedback of what resources do residents want to see in this toolkit. More to come. This is part of the Building Community Resilience Workshop series at the end of August. And then lastly, for the social and community resilience, we have a HEPA air purifier program. It was open for the entire month of April. You got 2 more days to apply. We have had over 150 applications, as well as several in Spanish. Priority will be provided to residents identified as most vulnerable from adverse health effects. This was made possible by a Smoke Ready grant this year. And last year we ran the pilot. This year we've learned a lot from that pilot that we ran. This year we'll be handing out educational flyers, both in English and Spanish, about how to maintain your flyer, as well as that extra filter, so that those that receive a filter will get an email a year down the line as a reminder to switch out their filter. So it's a great program. Next, we'll switch to the built environment, and this is really our structures that we have here in Lafayette. The Land Use Code, the International Energy Conservation Code, and the Wildfire Resiliency Code are all codes that you all will see come to council. They have resilience components built in throughout those codes, and it's to enhance for new structures inbound in Lafayette to be as resilient as possible. And I will turn it over to Chief Bradshaw to talk about the Wildfire Resiliency Code.
Yeah, so we just wanted to highlight this for you. You'll be seeing this on May 5th and then again on June 2nd for 2 readings. This was developed kind of in late '23, made it way to legislature, so had some hoops to jump through at the Capitol, but we've been watching it very closely because we're a unique community in that we have about 120 acres of land that fall inside the statewide mapping risk areas. Of those 40 or so are open space, so not developable. So we're talking about kind of 83 acres on the west edge of Lafayette. And so we made a decision to ask you to adopt it by reference. It's a well-written code. It's you could read the whole thing. I have done it, so it's not exorbitant, I don't think. It really deals with kind of 2 areas: the built environment and the resources and stuff you can use to build your home. And then it deals with the surrounding area of the house, or the structure, I should say. And it kind of defines it between 0 and 5 feet as being non-combustible, and 5 to 30 is, a limited combustibility, if you will. So it's a really logical code, and it does a fair job of also providing a good starting place for a homeowner that may not be in the risk area but chooses to upgrade their home or their addition with wildfire resilient materials. So it's a great code, and the map is pretty accurate, we feel like, in terms of wildfire risk on the grasslands. It's a much different map in the mountains, but so you'll see that again May 5th for first reading, and then on June 2nd with a public hearing and a presentation. So that's what that's all about. But if you have any questions between now and then, please,
When you say
please reach
adoption
out.
by reference, I haven't encountered doing that yet. What does that mean?
Sure. Luckily, the attorney's here in case I screw this up. It means that we're going to adopt it just as the state has it. And if the state changes something, we will use those changes. We're not going to modify it to adopt it. We could do that in the future if we felt like we wanted to go a step further or be more specific. But for now, we're going to adopt it just as the state has it written.
Will we get to, I'm curious because I think I live in one of those 83 acres on the edge of, not absolutely sure, but will we have a chance to look at it?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. We'll bring all the mapping polygons. I'm a polygon guy. Yeah.
And what's a little bit different when you do the state type of thing is that on May 5th, it will be on your consent agenda because the public hearing is required to be on the second reading. So we figured we could just get through the May 5th one and then have the robust conversation on the second. But in both instances, we'll have the memo and the ordinance for you guys to prepare yourselves with. And the reason, sorry, a little bit further, the reason that it's split so far is that you also are required by state to have 15 days after the first reading to notice it, and so we have a 14-day calendar, so you'll have a little bit of space to really dive in and read the ordinance. Now, we've talked about new developments, but what about existing buildings? So I am glad to share about Power Ahead Colorado. This is a program that is hosted through DRCOG, Denver Regional Coalition of Governments. Again, lots of acronyms, yes. Rebates through Power Ahead Colorado are expected to arrive in May. So this is really to drive electrification at your home, not only heat pumps, which is pictured up on the screen, but also heat pump water heaters, electric vehicle charging stations, and it's really to decrease reliance on gas and make the home cleaner air. The webpage for Power Ahead Colorado is live. DRCOG is also working with all of the companies that are installing HVAC units and training them to also understand the technologies of heat pumps. It is a new technology, and education to contractors and HVAC professionals is crucial in the development and deployment of these electrified units. And this was all made possible by the Inflation Reduction Act that was a grant awarded to DRCOG. And then next, we are going to transition to the last bubble, the resilient landscape and environment. So we'll talk about community partners, tree canopy enhancements, turf conversions, prescribed burns, and fuel reduction efforts. And we won't talk about the Lafayette Water Readiness Plan because you received a presentation about it, but I did want to highlight that that is incorporated into our resilience plan. So first things first, community partners. This was mentioned earlier in the previous presentation, but we do partner with Resource Central that offers programs to support resilient landscapes to homeowners. They have also expanded into HOA programming. There are 4 HOAs participating in turf conversion this year, as well as some turf assessments to understand what is a path forward to reduce some of that water usage. Northern Water was also brought up earlier, but they do provide grants to HOAs as well as the city to support turf conversion of more than 1,000 square feet or more. And I am aware that there have been HOAs that have taken advantage of that in Lafayette. And then we also work very closely with wildfire partners, and these are really programs that enhance wildfire resilience in our community. I wanted to take some time to highlight the importance of trees and resilience. Trees provide a variety of different benefits: shade, cooling. Usually the turf next to the trees is reduced for water usage. The shade that provides, if it's next to a structure, that structure needs lower heating and cooling. So again, it's not just a tree. It's far more than a tree. So we have been doing several different tree canopy enhancements. The first is the Community Forestry Corps. This is the third year we are running that program. This plants trees in public spaces, so our parks, our open spaces, and then works with local youth to hand water those trees. Because of the success of that program, we've also evolved into a growing shade program, which is piloting this year. It uses that same concept of the Community Forestry Corps, but it's for privately owned land. So we are going to be planting about 75 trees in a disproportionately impacted census block here in Lafayette, which the City Hall is technically included, but it's all the way to Emma Street and then all the way to Peak. And that tree pickup will be on May 9th. Next week, we're also kicking off our community-wide tree inventory, which is very exciting. We'll really have a chance to be more proactive in protecting our tree canopy by understanding the health of our trees. This will be in partnership with our Community Services Department, specifically our Parks and Open Space Division. We're very excited about this. It will also lead to an enhanced webpage for more information for individuals to learn how to take care of trees. And the intent is also to develop a tree list specific for developers that is going to be based on Lafayette's climate and soil. So there is a lot of excitement about protecting and enhancing our tree canopy. And I know this question was brought up earlier about how much do I water a tree? And in the past few months when it has been very hot, we've worked with the Community Services Department to figure out how we can educate on how much to water a tree. So what we've been advising on is water once a month, about 10 gallons per inch of tree trunk diameter, or 15 to 18 gallons per shrub. Hand watering, again, because don't turn your sprinklers on until May. But there's a lot of really great projects and partnerships and collaborations for tree canopy enhancements and protections. Next, we have turf conversions. There have been several throughout the city, including City Hall, the library, the police department, and Fire Station Number 1. Fire Station Number 1 is our WaterWise demonstration garden. So if individuals are interested in learning what type of plants to plant in their own home, they can go there and peruse. There's ID or plant identification cards for each of the species that are there. There's also educational placards specifically about fire resilience and what's best practice. So highly recommend visiting if you're interested. And then I want to highlight city parks that have also done some conversions. This year we are converting Simpson Mine Park in the next month or so. And then we've also done some medians. I will turn it over to Chief Bradshaw.
Sure. So wrapping up here, we just want to talk a little bit about the future of prescribed fire in Lafayette. We've done a good job around the golf course the last couple years. I think we've built some trust with the community and doing it correctly and doing correct messaging. So we're taking the time right now. Fire restrictions are a good time to develop plans for later. So we're working on a really robust prescribed fire ordinance, which you will probably see maybe late summer. And that includes a lot of things. Our open space team and some specialists within the fire department are kind of working on that comprehensive plan. So when we talk about prescribed fire, we're talking about really accomplishing 3 objectives. One of them is fuel control, removing basically generally the density of fuels. So we're burning up everything that's dead and kind of dormant on the, on or near the ground. And we're also talking about fuel continuity, right? Anytime we can build a fuel break, that is to our advantage for an event down the road, right? It gives us kind of an upper hand in those areas. And then we're lucky to have our own open space experts right in-house. So one of the things we're doing is talking about when fire should be prescribed, what time of year, and what are the impacts on noxious weeds, and what is likely to replace those weeds with a healthier ecosystem. And so we're being careful about all of those things. So what we know is it requires forethought and partnership and great communications with the community. So we're definitely not rushing into any of these. We've been talking about the NEBO and open space for the better part of 2 years on how to approach that wisely and patiently. So those are the kind of things we're working on. So hopefully you'll see that ordinance later on in the year.
And I would just add that our open space department uses other grassland management tools as well, such as mowing, and I think Lizzie, you might have some other strategies that Lexi outlined for us to help manage grasslands in addition to tools like prescribed fire. And so we have different approaches that we use along trails, along the borders of private property and open space, so that we have some buffers to help kind of mitigate some of the risk if and when our grasses are getting high and tall, and there's dry seasons like we're in right now. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so I think hopefully what we demonstrated tonight is that there is no one department in the city who's working on this list of things. I don't think if you'd asked me 10 years ago as a fire chief, I would be working with resiliency and sustainability and open space. I don't think that conversation would have been taking place. So I think it's very cool, very exciting that we have all of these different expertises, all this expertise, all this expertise in the city to allow us to kind of work together and collaborate on some of these topics. I think that the workshop that was done tonight, it wasn't just the fire department. It was lots of other departments there helping us deliver those messages. So I think what you saw tonight is how we're all working together, to take bites of the apple wherever we can. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the summary of where we're at, and I think we're all happy to answer questions. We have some open space support here, so yeah.
And then everything we talked about has links, so feel free to peruse those or share them. But I think at this point in time, we're open to questions that you haven't asked so far.
Questions from council? Councilor Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you again so much. This is fantastic. A couple months ago, there we go. So as context, I'm the council liaison to the Older Adults Advisory Board. And a couple months ago, they were given to review for comment kind of a packet with different ways to respond to emergencies, packing a bug out bag, and they provided really thoughtful comments that were then taken back. What's the status of that packet, and when can we sort of expect to see that in the broader community? And did I invent this? Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I do know what you're talking about. We had a really robust conversation with them, and they had some really specific feedback for older residents. I won't say that we've nailed that into anything exactly, but what it is, you will see it in the workshops we're doing. You'll see kind of those different aspects of this might work for you. And one of the things about building your neighborhood and building your own resiliency is you need to find the resources that are right for you. And so that's what we're trying to do is get that kind of wide-ranging list of suggestions and letting residents pick for themselves or pick alongside their neighbor or pick in a group. I think we're really excited about this kind of neighborhood group. It's you used to always know your neighbor, right? When we were kids, but now you don't. So it's kind of sad. So yeah, I think you'll see it mostly appear in that context.
Okay, great. Thank you. Because I loved it, and part of the reason I thought it was so effective is it incorporated a lot of what y'all have presented in this presentation to a very digestible format. And again, huge kudos to the folks on that board. I will hold other questions and turn to other councilors. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to ask, because of the times that we're in right now, oh my gosh. So to have people know their neighbors, not a lot of people might want to know they're there. And I hear residents, that's one piece, and I hear residents say, how can you, fill in the blank, when we're in a drought, and why are we developing when, fill in the blank. So as we have people who are here, but there are more people moving in, theoretically, as we develop over time. What does it look like to engage? Resilience may imply, this is for the people who are definitely here and they're going to stay here. I don't think people leave when they get here because they realize how great it is. But what do you, for a community engagement, are we approaching people that are new to Lafayette differently than we're approaching people who are here? Is that, how would we?
We haven't done too much community engagement, but we're not, at least right now in what we've done so far, we're not designating those who are new versus those existing because ultimately they're Lafayette residents. And even if they do move away, they will still have that personal resilience strengthened. And we're not alone. There's other communities also looking to also increase and enhance that social resilience piece. So right now, it's just one Lafayette, and we are bringing everyone along regardless of their personal situations.
I want to say kumbaya.
I would just say, I would add to that, I think we're engaging everyone in the community, all residents, and I think there's a couple reasons. One is that our risk has elevated significantly, I think, in the last, 10 years and with the, climate issues that we've been facing. And then I think our risk awareness has elevated in this community and in Boulder County because of the, the disasters that we faced. And so I think people feel more vulnerable and I think they feel more aware. And so I think the community now is in a position to understand that they are at risk. And so I think for them to understand, mountain communities have been feeling this way for years, right? Mountain communities have understood they're in the WUI, right? They're in the wildland-urban interface. And now our communities, I think, on the plains realize that, this is a real reality for us, especially in a drought year like we're in now. So whether you've lived in Lafayette for 25 years, this has become a stark reality, that this is a part of our life. We're in a drought. It's very dry. We have potential for this risk to happen here. And so I think whether you're new to the area or whether you've been here for a long time, knowing what your, actions should be as an individual homeowner is, I think, just a part of life. And so it's, to some degree, it's new to everyone to understand, hey, I need to understand what I need to pack before I go. I need to understand how to prepare my home. I need to understand what to do with my pets. I need to know my neighbors so I know that if they're on vacation and, I'm home, or if I'm on vacation. I think it is kind of, in some sense, a little bit new to everybody.
I would agree. And I think part of the perception was that it could never happen to us, kind of thing.
Right.
Which was hard to bite my lip when I heard that. I'm like, really? So what makes you think it's not gonna? If we are, the idea behind resilience, yes, definitely being preparing for, and recovering from an event. I think it might be prudent to point out that those events might be happening more frequently. It's going to flood in Boulder County. It'll just happen. But the wildfire piece, I think, has a lot of people upset that it did happen. But just knowing that it might be hard for people to accept seeing multiple events, like recovering from one before the next one happens, is a super important piece. And that's why did we think resilience is that, hey, you know what? We found out this isn't the right thing to plant. The first time, don't replant it. And then 2 more things. for development purposes, every time I see turf replacement, I'm pretty sure new developments put in turf. Like, when we look at land use code, is there any way to convince developers not to put it in to start out with, because they compress the soil, put it on an angle, and have a half inch of turf so they water and it runs off? Theoretically, maybe that happens. But is there any way to is that in our code to suggest, hey, maybe don't even put in turf to start out?
It is, Kentucky bluegrass in how the draft code is written is not allowed, which that is the most water intensive turf option. At our city parks, we're testing Tahoma 31, which is a new variant of grass. Dennis, feel free to, if I'm saying anything or want to add to it, jump in. But that's an option for developers. It's a very, very low water grass. We're seeing 7 to 80% in water savings using that grass. So that's conversations we'll have with the developer. And we are leveraging CSU's list of native species for developers to refer to.
Is that the grass that sits in Tarentaria, where the playground is?
Yeah, at Spruce Park.
Yeah.
So
You should all check out the grass. Tahona, is that what you call it?
it's Tahoma 31. It's a type of Bermuda grass that was developed at Oklahoma State University.
Tahoma 31, big fan. Last thing, I'm going to guess what the 5 proposed sites are. And I know that Sister Carmen came up as one of them. Do we get to find out what the other proposed ones are right now?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So we have the library, the rec center, the YMCA, the Boulder Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and then Sister Carmen.
I saw that. Thank you so much. That's all the questions I have.
Any other questions? If not, I'll come back to Council Burley, who I believe had a few more.
I had just one more. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the elements in the Venn diagram was about that social community resilience. I love this. I used to work in violence prevention, extremism prevention, so I think about that a lot. I heard from a resident earlier today, and thank you so much, Katie, for helping me with this. I heard from a resident in Lafayette today who said that they were aware of a neighbor, a Latino family, being bullied by another neighbor, experiencing some pretty serious harassment. So flagged it, and our police department handled it, I think, very professionally. How do y'all think, as an integrated group, and particularly on the resilience piece, how do you think about deploying city resources in a prevention model? I know there's community policing elements, and I'm really interested to dig further into this toolkit, the San Antonio one. But how do you think about leaning forward? And I recall the really horrific incident in Boulder last June 1st. So terrorism was on the slide, and that's not foreign to our community as well. How do you think about prevention? And I think I heard Mayor Pro Tem Barnes, there's facets of our neighborhoods and Lafayette residents who don't want to be maybe known right now, given what's going on at the federal level. How do y'all think about prevention and going out to meet folks where they are and potentially nip problems in the bud?
Well, I think, part of our communications strategy has been to try to build some tools for more hard to reach facets of the community, like, better using our Somos Lafayette tool, and also trying to establish and leverage ambassadors who are able to go into parts of the community where they are not comfortable coming to like a resilience, actual meeting, and where we can come with language resources that we can actually talk to them about what they might need to be equipped to be, more prepared. So I think those are some things that as we evolve our resources and services that we could probably, that we would look into, being able to do a little bit more like, strategic and tactical around reaching different facets of the community in that way.
Yeah, I'll also say we try to be thoughtful about where we host events. So a lot of these are like at the library instead of City Hall, where it could be perceived as a different kind of like level of government. And then for those that aren't aware, we have like a community mediation program. So we try to keep things like out of the court system and try to mediate cases. And so it's a very objective third party person that isn't necessarily the government. So there's definitely work to be done, but I think that we're, recognizing that there's, especially in a community this diverse, like areas that we certainly try to reach out to.
And that was a big factor in our conversations around the resilience hubs. When we talked about having one resilience hub, which from a resources perspective and potentially like an economic perspective, financial perspective, that might be a better strategy to put all of our, eggs in one basket to be able to have like solar backup and all of those aspects. But realistically, having a network where you had more easy to reach neighborhood resources in different parts of the community, and also where you had facilities that there wasn't any resistance or concern about going to different places, where you had actually access to different places that people would feel comfortable going, whether it's a place of, worship or faith, and whether it's a place where they already go to get, resources, family resources, et cetera. So that was kind of a lot of the thinking behind that. And we heard that in some of the feedback when we did the Resilience Hub research too. Yeah.
And I will add, we've had great success working through community-based organizations like Thorn and Sister Carmen, who have like neighborhood leaders that we meet with, and then they're able to meet with those organizations or those neighborhoods or neighbors and relay the information to them. So that's been very successful. And just one success story that I want to highlight is this was early on. We wanted to get engagement from the Hispanic community, and I went to an event with Thorn Nature. It was something with kids in a play, and then they had this huge potluck. And I was really just a guest to just see the celebration, but I had the opportunity to speak to them and start building relationships with those residents. I speak fluent Spanish, so I was able to connect with them in that capacity, especially as someone who works in government, and that distrust is lacking. So there's unique opportunities that we try to leverage when that opportunity is there. And we continue to look for those opportunities throughout.
Amazing. Councilor Gianella.
Thank you so much. I really don't have any questions. I'm struggling to come up with anything. The presentation was very thorough, very informative. On this discussion of resource hubs, I'm curious about the locations of them and where they are in Lafayette, and recognize that I feel like they're all on the north and east side of town, and you probably thought about, is there a location on this side of town that makes sense? And, if the goal is for the community to be able to go to those during an emergency, how does this work? Especially when I feel like this side of town is just a little more vulnerable.
I will say, yes, we did identify that there was gaps, especially in like the southeastern part of Lafayette. Our goal is to set up the 5 community resource hubs, but also allow for other businesses to say, I want to be a hub, and let that opportunity for anyone to apply and be a hub. It could be an HOA common center.
Could be Willoughby.
Yep, there's a lot of opportunities there. So
This is down the road as well. So.
I'll also note, like, at least with when we do more of the typical emergency management stuff, at least with recent PSPSs, because all of the county is on these emergency calls, we know which centers in Boulder or Louisville or somewhere that may be adjacent that are easy for those types of residents to get to. Like, we would be then pushing out that message saying, we haven't needed to activate it that drastically, but like, for example, Superior has a really good resilience one, Louisville, and so if we needed to, if we realized that this was going to be a multiple day thing, like, we would be pushing out other people's information for where our residents can go to. Yeah. So it really gets back to full circle, how this regional partnership is so critical for any of this stuff.
Yeah, and what is the discussion with BVSD? Because I feel like there's potentially a lot of opportunity, because there's elementary schools everywhere, right, as one example.
Yep, they're also on these calls, so I think definitely continuing on with that, and I know Melissa communicates with them as well. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was great.
Great. I don't see any more questions, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So that finishes our 2 agenda items. We have one more agenda item, which is our regular recurring agenda item, the new ideas. However, just following the process, talking to staff earlier, I don't believe anything was flagged to them, and I didn't have anything flagged to me personally. So just kind of looking around the room, making sure we're not missing anything.
I do have something. And
Councilor
I'm
Bullion.
sorry, I was going to meet with our city manager yesterday. We had to shift gears a little bit. And I'm happy to table it to a future thing, but I've done a little bit of pondering on how we can make some of our meetings more effective. And I've talked to a few of you about some of the gaps and opportunities and things that are working really well. So if folks are open to that, I'd love to have that conversation now, but also happy to hold fire.
When you say have that conversation now, Kyle, do you mean to have a conversation about a process for considering or to actually consider at this moment?
Just to be clear, you can't consider, so for the benefit of new counselors, right, I tried to send an email, but new ideas is really intended to say, I have this idea, is the majority of council supportive of staff exploring it more and bringing it back? It is not intended to have a conversation about the direction you want to go because it is not noticed legally to that, only the new ideas portion is noticed, and so it really was, like the example that we had, which was an easy one, was former councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Wong wanted to eliminate the taxation on gold bullion, right? Brought it up, council said, let's look into that, right? Staff brought it forward and said, actually, we don't think this is gonna be a huge financial impact, it's only maybe 2 businesses. And then council decided, should we do that ordinance? And so I just, sorry to interrupt.
No,
I
please.
know we didn't get a chance to meet, but I think just from that conversation, we want to be real cautious about open meetings law and just conversations that the public might not have had an opportunity to be noticed about.
Absolutely. And so to pull that thread, and we'll see if y'all think it makes sense to go further, for like a process question that isn't policy, could we discuss that in new ideas? Like a new idea is, could our process look like this? Are folks interested in exploring that formally in like a council meeting discussion?
Yes, process, but not to decide that
Not
that's
to
the
decide.
one that you were
Right.
going to.
Right.
But not to have a robust conversation, just more, what's your idea? Is council supportive of having a public conversation at a later date?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, if that's okay to proceed, my idea is that we collectively try to shorten our regular meetings. I kind of see that we're all grappling with a bit of a collective action problem where we all own it. Recognizing that the agendas of late have had really important things, so like necessarily that takes some time. At the same time, regularly going to 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m. is not great. I think that's a challenge for everybody here, and it's certainly, as I've talked to a number of you, we all recognize it's a significant burden on staff, it's a burden on residents, it's not good for our health and well-being. And I just personally, I thought when I was biking home last Tuesday, I was like, I'm not safe right now. And then I thought of y'all driving home or folks, with childcare responsibilities or what have you. So I guess the process thing I would love to dig into is what kind of ideas, opportunities, potential levers that we could pull to bring these meetings that are going 6 hours regularly to a more manageable time frame. I put together a list of things that we don't need to discuss, but I'll hand out and you can take with you, just as like a menu of options, because I was just trying to put different ideas down on paper that I had heard from folks that I bumped into. I did a little bit of sleuthing around for a lot of our neighboring municipalities to see how they approached this problem set, but I guess the thing I was put on the table is I'm having a blast in this role, as I know the other 2 new counselors are as well, and I'm feeling like stretched when we're going to 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m., and I suspect some of you all are and our city staff are as well. So that's kind of the process thing that I would love to explore collectively. And to be clear, I own this problem just as much as the rest of us. I don't think this is a point fingers thing. I think it's very much like how do we collectively tackle this issue. And I'll go ahead and hand out this for you to do with as you please. Welcome thoughts.
Councilor Fridlin, thoughts?
I just want to add some support to your ask. I think it's unsustainable to be going that late on a repeated basis regularly. It's okay if it's a exception and sometimes we're gonna have to do it. Totally okay with that. But I feel like we have been going quite late quite often. And so I do think having some conversation or future discussion about like why is that happening, to me makes sense, right? I hate rushing necessarily to solutions all the time without understanding the underlying problem. That would be my addition.
Any other counselors wish to add something or just add your support? Counselor General?
I'm happy to have the discussion. I'm not sure I'm going to agree with every proposed solution, but I think having the discussion makes sense to me.
Mayor Protem, good? Great. This one's kind of a weird one because it's mostly process. I'll talk to staff and we'll kind of figure out what the best way to bring this back to council is and what format. I'm also on board. You know. Cool. So with that, great. Any other new ideas? Just to make sure we don't leave anything. Great. All right. Well, I will adjourn us for tonight. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's 8:40.